the Honourable Speaker, the Honourable Prime Minister, the Honourable Leader of Opposition, Honourable Members of Parliament, our fellow Fijians. I present to Parliament and the Fijian people the 2021-2022 National Budget. There is nothing ordinary, Mr. Speaker, sir, about our lives at this moment. Never has our personal well-being and the health of our economy been more intertwined. And so this will not be an ordinary budget. Nearly 17 months on from our first case of the virus on 19 March 2020 and the COVID-19 response budget, which soon followed, we are still deep in the world's worst economic crisis in a century. This pandemic has stolen jobs and precious life. It has kept families apart in times of celebration and sadness. It has crippled industries built through strong vision and years of steady investment. And the arrival of the more virulent variants has sent its devastating toll to painful new heights. The burning question on the minds of the world's economists and every Fijian is, when will it end? For much of this ordeal, we have had no firm answers. As the virus exploded from an outbreak to an epidemic to a global pandemic, no one knew if the world would spend months, years, or even a decade at the mercy of this terrible disease. In the face of so many terrifying unknowns, many governments throughout the world made different choices. Some worked well and some did not. In Fiji, we chose drastic action to defend ourselves. The very day we confirmed our first case last year, we shut off international passenger travel. We locked down Nadi and Lautoka. We knew that these stopgap measures would have enormous repercussions. But without any known cure of vaccines at that time, they were the best defense we had. And they did buy us a full year without any local cases through which we sustainably navigated an increasingly uncertain financial situation. Tonight, Mr. Speaker, sir, is different. Despite the darkness and difficulty of the present outlook, we have our clearest view of a future that is safe and an economy that is on the move. We are not dispensing band-aid solutions or depending on drastic and damaging measures that will cause structural unemployment and wide-scale poverty. We are no longer fighting to win a single battle against this virus. We are fighting to win the war. And we can win because we have vaccines, enough for every adult in Fiji. This powerful defense has arrived more quickly than we dared to hope. As of yesterday, Mr. Speaker, sir, 64% of our target population, in other words, 377,090 adults, have received at least one dose of the COVID-19 vaccine. And 12.5% of the target population are fully vaccinated, in other words, with 2 doses. We cannot take that progress, Mr. Speaker, sir, for granted when less than 30% of the populations of other upper middle income countries like Fiji have received a vaccine dose. And when, due to unjust issues of accessibility, some wealthier nations administer more vaccines in a single day than other low-income countries at the start of the pandemic. And we thank India for our first large shipment, and then Australia and New Zealand for helping expedite our access to free vaccines for our people. Australian and New Zealand medical teams, who the Honourable Prime Minister welcomed yesterday officially, are now in the country as well, sharing their invaluable supplies, knowledge, skills and experience with us to save the lives of Fijians. We thank them for being indispensable allies. Mr. Speaker, sir, as you and many in this room know personally, vaccines are safe. They work remarkably well, and they are the key to reopening our economy at its full capacity. And we are pressing ahead quickly to vaccinate every eligible Fijian, which we view clearly as the most essential element to protect ourselves and pave the way to a sustainable and COVID-safe economy and way of life. From March of 2020 until today, we have paid out more in direct, government-funded unemployment benefits than in all other years of Fijian history combined. Tonight, we are announcing a budgetary blueprint for the next financial year that keeps the helping hand of government open and extended to those who need it. And it prepares us for the possibilities of a post-pandemic future. This budget, Mr. Speaker, sir, maintains financial prudence and socio-economic stability. Above all, it is focused on securing Fiji's long-awaited comeback from this plague, a recovery that depends entirely on the protection of every eligible Fijian through vaccines. Mr. Speaker, sir, in Israel, in the United States of America, in the United Kingdom, in Europe, and across the developed world, vaccines have allowed people to safely move about freely out of their homes. Businesses are reopening. Industries like travel and tourism are springing back to life. Financial markets are reigniting and COVID-driven unemployment is falling. That promise of progress is still a distant dream for many in the developing world, where there are still large pockets of unvaccinated populations. But it is not, Mr. Speaker, sir, it is not a distant dream for Fiji. It is a reality that awaits us as quickly as we can protect ourselves from the virus through vaccines and prepare our economy for renewal. Your government, Mr. Speaker, sir, will not sit idly by and wait for the fate to control our destiny. We have a vision. Through decisive action and leadership, we will see that vision realized, come what may. Mr. Speaker, sir, we expect to have at least 80% of the 587,651 Fijians who make up our target population fully vaccinated by 31 October this year. In other words, 470,121 adults. In a night full of numbers, Mr. Speaker, sir, this is the most important metric I will mention. Only when we can achieve widespread immunity from the virus can we get back to our normal way of life here at home and secure the chance to reopen to the world and have the world reopen to us. We can achieve that mission with the full cooperation of all Fijians. We most certainly will achieve it. For us Fijians, Mr. Speaker, sir, the vaccines are free. They're easy to access. And as of last week, every employer and employee in Fiji must be vaccinated. No jabs, no jobs. That is more than a tagline. It is the stark reality of the matter. Mandated or not, without vaccines, many Fijians won't have a job to go back to, because only vaccines can assure the full return of entire industries. Without vaccines, our schools will not open. Without vaccines, we cannot mount an economic recovery. No jabs, no opportunities. No reopening of stadiums, restaurants or borders. No jabs, no tourism. No jabs, no national airline. No jabs, no chances to see our friends and families abroad. Without vaccines, we cannot gather and be together safely. No jabs, no precious time with neighbors and loved ones. Couples separated by closed borders will not reunite. Even within countries we have that. Those grieving the loss of a loved one cannot find comfort in laying the departed to rest with the comfort of family. No jabs, no sports. No rugby tournaments, no volleyball matches in the park or in the village green, no unmasked runs along the seawall. No jabs, no future, and no freedom to return to the lives we all miss so dearly. The changes in the law, Mr. Speaker, sir, that we have made create safe workplace environments and ensure that vulnerable members of society are protected. These laws, Mr. Speaker, sir, do not breach any of the rights enshrined in the Fijian Constitution. Any good lawyer with sophisticated knowledge of constitutional law can tell you that. Mr. Speaker, sir, we are acting to protect everyone, not please everyone. And we cannot rely on fence-sitters, lawyers or otherwise. Nor can we tolerate the lies of anti-vaxxers. many of whom reside overseas and can hide away behind the comfort of wealth and privilege. Those who question the safety and the legitimacy of vaccines are choosing ignorance over proven science and more than a century of experience with modern vaccines. And they're gambling with our health and our economy and squandering the potential of coming generations. Their unfounded fears, their superstitions, their politicking, and in some cases their deliberate lies threaten lives and the security and the prosperity of every Fijian. And Mr. Speaker, sir, we will not hold our future hostage to utterly their foolishness, opportunism, and utter lack of decisive leadership. With vaccines and with enough of us vaccinated, our future looks very different than today. The unemployed can be employed. Those most marginalized can again provide for their families. We can fill our hotels, open our schools, we can save lives and restore our way of life. We can do things as simple as have a neighbor come over for dinner, and things as necessary as reopen our borders and rebuild our economy. Government can revive streams of revenue that support social welfare, free education, unemployment benefits, civil service salaries, and other services that every one of us rely on. Without vaccines and the immunity they offer, we risk losing all of that. We will see massive drops in government revenue, massive cuts to government assistance and social welfare, and massive cuts to civil service salaries. Mr. Speaker, sir, we thank those of you and all of people listening to us in helping avert that future by coming out in full support of the vaccine and who have been vaccinated. We thank those of you wearing your masks and using the Care Fiji contact tracing app we've developed and operating in line with our other COVID-safe measures. You are the patriots this national moment of challenge demands. We are well in line with our COVID-safe measures this evening. We are speaking with you from the Parliament, where we are enforcing strict physical distancing. I'm not wearing a mask so that I can be understood clearly. There is no audience in the chamber, and many members of the Parliament are joining us virtually. I think probably more than half. Our caution extends far beyond the walls of this august Parliament. We are equipping our frontliners with the tools they need to defend our people's lives and livelihoods against the devastating second wave of the COVID-19 virus. And we thank the doctors and nurses treating patients in our hospitals. We thank the police and the military officers, the naval officers, and the relevant staff of government and statutory authorities for enforcing our health protection measures. We thank the ambulance and government vehicle drivers who are transporting ill patients to care centres and health workers to the communities they serve. We thank the delivery teams in government and private sector bringing groceries and household items to those in isolation and quarantine at home. This is a budget for these frontliners and for all of the ordinary Fijians they are making such great sacrifices to protect. With government revenues down, Mr. Speaker, sir, we have instituted a hiring freeze throughout the civil service. However, we made exceptions for the Ministries of Health and Medical Services and Communications, as well as the police. We're in a public health crisis that depends on well-resourced health centres, clear communications, and the enforcement of the rule of law. So we must ensure each of these arms of government are well-staffed and well-capable of defending us from the virus. We also thank the private GPs, Mr. Speaker, sir, who have opened their clinics to offer non-COVID medical care. We thank the employers who have kept staff in their jobs despite the downturn in business, as well as those who have worked with us to reopen their doors in line with our COVID-safe measures, including the Care Fiji QR code system. We thank companies like Vodafone and Digicel that have helped us deliver unemployment benefits quickly to those in need. This is also a budget for all businesses of all sizes, and it is built on that same spirit of public-private sector collaboration. Ultimately, Mr. Speaker, sir, that is how we will succeed together. But when we do, and Fiji is open again, families are reunited and planes start flying in tourists, our economy will not magically return to pre-pandemic levels of activity. That we must do ourselves, and I cannot sugarcoat that reality. We are closing out the most challenging economic period in Fijian history. a COVID-driven, once-in-a-century contraction of 15.7% of our GDP. Tonight is about reclaiming what this pandemic has lost. And this budget is built to achieve three objectives. Number one, we must protect ourselves from the virus. Vaccines give us that defense. Until we have vaccine-induced herd immunity, total adherence to our health measures must be maintained. Two, we must continue to sustainably support those individuals and businesses, whether they're micro, small, medium and large, who have been hardest hit by the pandemic. With government revenues gutted, it will demand every ounce of our compassion and creativity to make this crisis tolerable for as many Fijians for as long as we can. There are many new measures in this budget to spur job creation and lift the cost burden on farmers, market vendors, public service vehicle drivers, fishers, students and other hardworking Fijians. And we are removing costly, inefficient and outdated bureaucratic processes and regulations. Three, we must continue to future-proof Fiji. That means strengthening our resilience to future pandemics and to the impacts of a warming planet, which are already upon us. We need tourism back, of course, but we need even more eggs in our economic basket as well. We have to further diversify our economic base to make us more resilient to adversities that will surely come in this century and more open to new opportunities, including bluer and greener sources of employment for our people. Guided by these objectives, Mr. Speaker, sir, this budget will do more than hold us over through the rest of the pandemic. It will, Mr. Speaker, sir, empower us to reach our vaccine targets and join the nations that are rapidly innovating their way out of this crisis. Because, Mr. Speaker, sir, if we achieve our vaccine target by the 31 October deadline, we will be in an excellent position to not only welcome back visitors by the Christmas holiday, but to spend that Christmas together safely with our loved ones and friends here in Fiji, just as we always have. Ahead of that goal, we are already working behind the scenes to establish mutual recognition of vaccine protocols with countries such as Australia, New Zealand, Korea, Singapore, and the United States of America. We're not wasting time pondering the moral philosophy of only vaccinated people traveling. We are considering every possible avenue that guarantees a swift recovery. And we are making progress, Mr. Speaker, sir. And as you would know, Mr. Speaker, sir, that progress is not always achieved in the public arena, but more often behind the scenes. We are here to govern and serve, not be social media celebrities who appear in the media or post on Facebook every few hours. We are focused on the future, because once the world reopens, tourists will have numerous choices. Every patch of paradise in the world will be competing for their share of the market. These visitors will be thinking about their wallets and their well-being. They will be price sensitive and they will be health sensitive. And the tourism markets that attract them will be the ones that implement the most coordinated national approach, from the package deals we offer to the health protocols we enforce for health and safety. And even as our tourism numbers make a comeback, it is generally accepted among industry experts and multilateral development agencies that it will take at least 3 years to bring our economy back to its robust pre-COVID state. Every day we delay our recovery makes the road ahead longer and steeper. And we don't just want to return to the Fiji of 2 years ago, we need more. We must charge through the window of opportunity that vaccines offer towards a resilient recovery, a recovery that strengthens us, a recovery that puts us on the road to long-term sustainable growth. That journey, Mr. Speaker, sir, demands an unshakable focus on our ambition for the nation. When a compass is set towards a destination, no good captain expects the course to be straight or easy. There will be storms that can blow the ship off course. There will be days when the wind does not blow at all. But despite the adversity, despite the difficulty, a good captain maintains their course. We have a good captain, Fiji. The principles and vision of our Honourable Prime Minister have never shifted with the winds. We have shown the flexibility and the creativity to navigate storms and traverse rough waters, but our compass remains fixed on our destination. An inclusive Fiji, a fair Fiji, a financially strong and stable Fiji, a resilient Fiji, a Fiji where anyone, anywhere can rise as far as their ability and ambition can carry them. Mr. Speaker, had we steered our economy at the whim of armchair experts on Facebook, or shifted course toward the ever-changing positions of some politicians, that dream would have died long ago. That fearful, reactive thinking serves no one and leads nations nowhere. That fearful, Mr. Speaker, sir, and reactive thinking serves no one and leads nations nowhere. These trying times demand skillful maneuvering, that demand sophisticated decision-making, not the crass populism and haphazard, even whimsical approach. Instead, this budget will have the same focus as we have consistently had for more than a decade. It does not lose sight of our destination. It is not a fearful budget, it is bold. It is sustainable. It is as decisive as it is creative. And it leans on our ability to adapt and think outside the box, which is something we know we can do, and we are already doing it. Throughout the pandemic, Mr. Speaker, sir, thousands of Fijians have reinvented themselves and their careers to provide for their families. Former hotel pastry chefs have opened home-based bakeries. Small garment shops and tailors have put their sewing machines to work producing face masks. Shopkeepers, even some farmers, are making goods and payments available online and delivering their wares to the doorsteps of homes. Firms are using technology like video conferencing and drones to deliver services while remaining COVID safe. This budget is driven by that same spirit of innovative resilience. Hard times come, Mr. Speaker, sir. We expect them and we prepare for them so that when they arrive, we can do more than whinge about them. Mr. Speaker, sir, we can do more than just complain or even try to steal from government. Like one gentleman who applied for unemployment benefits 8 different times during the same phase of assistance. We have to do more than just endure. We must adapt and build back better. We have done it before. We've done so from political upheavals. We have done so from our hemisphere's most ferocious storm, T.C. Winston, and the many other storms and floods that have followed. This storm may be different. The winds of the coronavirus hurricane have blown continuously for 17 months. We don't see its damage in leveled homes or flooded streets, but we feel its devastation everywhere. Regardless, Mr. Speaker, sir, once again, we can and will rebuild. We will do so sustainably in a manner that keeps our footing on rapidly shifting ground. Mr. Speaker, sir, the global economy declined by 3.3% in 2020 due to COVID-19, one of the largest global economic contractions in over 100 years. Large and developed economies mobilized trillions of dollars in economic stimulus measures to cushion the domestic impacts of the pandemic and finance large-scale investments in vaccine research and pre-orders. As vaccines roll out, the economies are expected to grow in 2021 and gradually return to pre-pandemic levels by 2024. However, most small island developing economies do not have the fiscal luxury to prop up the economies with huge stimulus measures, nor do they have the privilege of being first in the line to get vaccines. Most of the tourism-dependent small island countries have suffered double-digit economic contractions, widespread unemployment, fiscal crashes, and credit rating downgrades. These sudden, enduring shocks have overwhelmed the fiscal capacities of these nations to respond. On the domestic outlook, Mr. Speaker, sir, the reason for the 15.7% contraction of the Fijian economy in 2020 is not a mystery to anyone. It is primarily due to the halt in tourism activity after border closures. It could have been much worse. We in fact projected a contraction of nearly 20%, but the freedom we've granted businesses to adapt to the new normal has spared us from that level of economic loss. Still, we are dealing with record low consumer and business activity, high unemployment, and consequently declining business and household incomes. This, of course, has halved government revenue in 2020. The adversity does not end with COVID, Mr. Speaker, sir. We were hit by 3 major cyclones in the span of just 10 months. Category 4 TC Harold, Category 4 TC Yasa, and Category 2 TC Ana, and a 4th if you add Tropical Depression Bina. All landed their own blows on our people, delivering brutal reminders that a strong economy is vital to protecting our people from the consequences of climate change. Over the past 17 months, Mr. Speaker, sir, the Fijian government has had to make crucial strategic fiscal decisions accompanied by expansionary monetary policy measures. It took careful and prudent economic planning, combined with exceptional diplomatic dexterity, to maintain fiscal stability, stabilize the economy, and provide immediate support to those most affected. Diplomacy, Mr. Speaker, sir, as you very well know, isn't all about tweets and photo ops. At the core, it's about working together towards an agreed upon outcome. And Fiji's friendship in the region and around the world are quietly delivering for us at a time when multilateralism is humanity's best defense against the coronavirus, a global enemy we must defeat together. Mr. Speaker, sir, this is our 3rd national budget announcement during the pandemic. In early April of last year, through a rapid COVID-19 response budget, we redirected resources and took decisive measures to keep this virus out of Fiji. Then in last year's 2020-21 budget, which is going to end in a few weeks' time, we acted prudently to maintain services of our people, dropped taxes to maintain our competitive edge, and helped businesses recuperate and continued dispensing historic amounts of assistance to the unemployed in both the formal and informal sectors. Mr. Speaker, sir, the 2020-21 budget was delivered in a period of near total uncertainty and strove to meet the difficult moment in which it was announced. We introduced various measures to improve our competitiveness, not only in the tourism sector, but also by setting an enabling environment for other businesses to restart. We reduced taxes for the tourism sector. We completely removed the 6% STT. We reduced departure tax from $200 to $100. ECAL was cut from 10% to 5%. And the threshold increased from $1.25 million to $3 million. Alcohol taxes was reduced by 50%. Tariffs were cut across the board to 0 or 5% on over 2,000 tariff lines. Mr. Speaker, sir, we completely removed stamp duties. We completely removed business license fees. We removed these burdens to spur a recovery, and that relief will stay with us this financial year. They are not being changed. We provided support to businesses with various immediate tax relief measures and loan repayment holidays. We made more funds available through the RBF at low interest rates. We provided unemployment support to both the formal sector and informal sector. We continued paying social welfare support for the poor. We continued the disability allowance, the social pension scheme, and the electricity subsidy. We continued payment for the free water and gave support for transportation. We continued providing free education grants to schools so they could continue teaching and prepare for reopening. We paid for TELs and toppers. We continued with the first home buyers grant. The framework of last year's budget, Mr. Speaker, sir, was based on an extremely conservative revenue projection, resulting in a large projected deficit of $2 billion, equivalent to 20.2% of GDP. With the 2020-2021 financial year coming to an end in 2 weeks' time, we have done extremely well. I'm pleased to inform Parliament, Mr. Speaker, sir, that the fiscal deficit is estimated to be around 11.5% of GDP, almost half of the 20.2% net deficit that we had planned for and indeed budgeted for. With a lower projected net deficit of around 11.5% in the 2020-2021 fiscal year, government debt is estimated to be around $7.6 billion or 79.2% of GDP as of July 2021. This is $700 million lower than the earlier projected debt of $8.3 billion or 83% of GDP. The lower than budgeted debt to GDP ratio is despite a 5% lower nominal GDP due to the contraction of the Fijian economy in 2021. If the nominal GDP had remained unchanged at the levels projected in the budget, the debt to GDP ratio would have been much lower at 76.5% of GDP. Mr. Speaker, sir, we were able to achieve a lower debt to GDP ratio because of our tight control on operational expenditure, with a freeze on the size of the civil service, improved operational efficiency, use of new technology, and over 3 times higher inflows of non-tax revenues emanating largely from budget support and divestments. Prior to the second wave, tax collections were on track to surpass projections, in fact. However, because of various lockdown measures stemming from the second wave, the revenue was slightly lower than projected. Mr. Speaker, sir, macroeconomic stability is the bedrock of a sustained economic recovery. Unlike the conditions when previous economic crises hit Fiji, our pre-COVID balance of payment condition was relatively strong, with a healthy level of foreign exchange. So strong, in fact, Mr. Speaker, sir, that despite the closure of the tourism industry, which is our largest foreign exchange earner, foreign reserve levels have actually increased substantially, supported by external grants and borrowings and large inflows of foreign exchange following the recent divestment of Energy Fiji Limited. Muted import demand due to the downturn in the economy also was a contributing factor. Our strong reserves position has also ensured stability of the exchange rate and helped us to avoid unwarranted speculation that would have affected confidence in the Fijian dollar. It also helped the RBF maintain an accommodative monetary policy stance through these challenging times. Our strong reserves position will greatly support the recovery process because the financial sector remains flush with liquidity of over $1.6 billion, keeping downward pressure on interest rates. As credit risk conditions improve, major reductions are expected in interest rates that will support private sector investments and business activity. While foreign reserves remain comfortable at over $3.1 billion, proactive and sustainable measures are needed to address the underlying balance of payment issues. The export sector must be increased, new foreign direct investments incentivized, the tourism sector rebuilt, and the economy further diversified. Generally, Mr. Speaker, sir, we need to become more productive and more competitive in every way that we can. Mr. Speaker, sir, the financial sector continues to be sound, backed by the strong capital provisions of banks, despite the large loan provisionings. The increased level of borrowings because of COVID-19 has increased the level of public debt and inevitability, Mr. Speaker, sir, with government revenues so deeply depleted. While this counter-cyclical response was appropriate, returning to a macro-fiscal equilibrium will be a key focus for the medium term. Risks emanating from contingent liabilities also have to be managed to avoid any materialization of fiscal risks. The public debt to GDP ratio will be put down on a downward path as part of our medium-term fiscal consolidation plan. Mr. Speaker, sir, given that we still lack the luxury of complete certainty, we have adopted the same conservative revenue estimation strategy as last year. The downside, once again, is a high projected level of debt. We have to make such projections because we could indeed have high debt levels next year if our economy does not fully reopen, and we want to be fully transparent about the consequences of that worst-case scenario. Alternatively, if we do reopen and we do over-collect on revenue, that will give us a buffer that lowers borrowings and planned debt levels. This is the best way to plan. If we arrogantly assume that Fiji reopens and we misjudge and over-project revenues, we will face serious cash flow challenges that we cannot accept. Mr. Speaker, sir, for this budget, the 2021-2022 budget, we are making a total expenditure allocation of $3.69 billion with a total revenue projection of $2.08 billion. This results in a net deficit of $1.61 billion, equivalent to 16.2% of GDP, with projected debt at 91.6% of GDP. Tax revenue collections are projected at $1.59 billion, 45% lower than pre-COVID levels, but slightly higher than the 2020-2021 financial year. It is important to note that government will also carry over around $150 million in cash balances to the new financial year. This provides an additional buffer should tax revenues underperform. This is a change in strategy, Mr. Speaker, sir, as cash balances carried forward for the 2020-2021 financial year were included as part of loan funding, which was clearly laid out in the 2020-2021 budget documents. Non-tax revenues, Mr. Speaker, sir, are estimated at $487.5 million. As part of our public sector reforms, we're bringing on board strategic partners to improve service delivery and efficiency in the operations of state-owned entities. The divestment of EFL is a recent example in which we enlisted a reputable strategic partner in Fiji's energy sector to further our renewable energy revolution. Government will continue these reforms with further divestments planned for ATH, Amalgamated Telecom Holdings, Fiji Airports Limited, and other smaller state-owned enterprises. Such divestments are expected to generate around $150 million in non-tax revenue. Budget support grants from Fiji's key development partners have been a great help during the COVID-19 crisis. Government is currently in discussion with a number of development partners for budget support, conservatively estimated at approximately $120 million. Mr. Speaker, sir, the COVID response budget and the 2020-2021 budgets were a lifeline for many Fijians, and that support will remain intact, as will the foundation of our economic revival, and will seize the opportunity for recovery that vaccination provides. While this budget extends over the full financial year, it will be reviewed in 6 months. These uncertain times, Mr. Speaker, sir, I'm clearly being distracted. I think it requires, when you give a budget address, for members on the other side to pay attention. If they want to converse, they can leave the room. Please, Mr. Speaker, sir, I'm being disturbed. I could please request them not to do that. I'll read that line again. Mr. Speaker, sir, the COVID response budget and the 2020-2021 budgets were a lifeline for many Fijians, and that support will remain intact, as will the foundation for our economic revival, and will seize the opportunity for recovery that the vaccination provides. While this budget extends over the full financial year, it will be reviewed in 6 months. These uncertain times require us to be flexible and to adapt quickly to new realities. A better economic situation brought on by widespread vaccination will produce more revenue and provide more opportunity. We will want to take advantage of that. However, if the economy has not begun its recovery by then, we will have to scale this budget back considerably. And so a full review of the budget in 6 months' time is sensible and prudent. From the standpoint of finance and policy, we are doing a tremendous amount with the resources we have. And I will be going through all of the most important changes clearly and carefully this evening. Mr. Speaker, sir, before I do that, a bold budget must always begin in close consultation with members of the public that it is meant to serve. Over the past several weeks, we've spoken with more than 1,000 individuals representing different businesses, civil society groups, and faith-based groups through our national budget consultations. We also received a number of written submissions. We thank those who joined us, spoke with us, or wrote to us about the challenges they faced and shared constructive suggestions and ideas about the budget. We have listened and we are acting to help within our current constraints in some form or the other all of the different interest groups. Mr. Speaker, sir, with so many Fijians still out of work and on reduced hours, a considerable portion of this budget is dedicated to unemployment support. The social contract between the people and their government requires us to provide support in times of crisis through sustainable measures of social protection. It is our duty to help, and it is our duty to ensure we can sustainably provide that help as long as required. Mr. Speaker, sir, let's be clear about what we mean by the term sustainability. As I said earlier, that we had dispensed more in government-funded employment benefits in the 17 months since March of 2020 than in every other year of Fijian history combined, including assistance to those in the informal sector, a first for any government in Fiji. The level of assistance was unprecedented, and it was deployed carefully, so we did not empty the government's coffers in a matter of weeks or months. We acted prudently because we did not know how long this crisis would persist. Thank God we did. Had we bowed to those demanding, untenable levels of assistance, we would have run out of money in the early parts of last year and would have nothing to announce tonight. There would be nothing left for people who need support now. And we certainly would not be printing money to magically place in people's accounts like some unqualified pseudo-economists have suggested. Although we can see a plausible vaccine-managed end to this crisis, we have not lost sight of our duty and fiscal responsibility. So the assistance that comes in this budget will continue to be deployed carefully and sustainably so it can last us through the end of the year and even beyond. The unprecedented unemployment benefit that government introduced in the 2020-2021 financial year under the FNPF scheme saw government directly disburse now $205 million to those only in the informal sector, in the formal sector I should say, and $32 million to the informal sector. These were direct cash benefits apart from other forms of socio-economic assistance such as utility payments. Mr. Speaker, sir, today we are announcing over $200 million in unemployment income support to Fijians affected by COVID-19, both in the formal and informal sectors. Starting 1 August 2021, every affected Fijian unemployed in the formal and informal sector will be entitled to a monthly allowance of $120 for 6 months, which will be paid in 2 lump sum payments. The first lump sum payment of $360 per person will be done in August 2021 to cater for the 3 months from August to October, with a total estimated payout of around $100 million. This support will assist individuals who are in the formal and informal sectors, are above the age of 18 years, living in Viti level, and do not benefit from any social welfare payments, education allowances, any other government-funded assistance, or withdrawals from FNPF. This assistance will only be provided to those eligible individuals who have received at least their first dose of COVID-19 vaccine before the application period ends. So, Mr. Speaker, sir, eligible Fijians have at least 3 weeks from now to ensure that they get at least the first dose of the COVID-19 vaccine. No jabs, no unemployment benefit. We will make the second payment of $360 in November to eligible Fijians provided they are fully vaccinated by 31 October, with a total estimated payout of an additional $100 million. This payment will cater for the 3 months ending January 2022. We will make medical exceptions, of course, for those with a certificate from the Permanent Secretary for Health and Medical Services. Individuals will be required to apply for this assistance, and payouts will be made using M-Pesa and MyCash platforms. It will also be mandatory for applicants to provide their birth certificate registration number and their tax identification number apart from other details. Mr. Speaker, sir, this is necessary because assistance is being paid out on an individual basis. So, for example, if there are 4 eligible individuals per household, the household will receive an unemployment payout of $1,440 for the first payment, and an additional $1,440 for the second payment. A household with 10 eligible individuals will receive a total payment of $7,200 directly from government. Mr. Speaker, sir, the earlier initiative whereby unemployed Fijians were eligible for $220 fortnight payment from FNPF will continue for members with sufficient general account balances. All those who have exhausted the general account balances or do not want to access the general account balance will be eligible for the $720 per person payout under the new unemployment initiative. Mr. Speaker, sir, Despite massive reductions in fiscal revenue, our social safety net has not been torn away because we have not forgotten our obligation to protect the most marginalized Fijians. For this budget, we are providing $120 million for the Poverty Benefit Scheme, Child Protection Allowance Program, Disability Allowance Program, Social Pension Scheme, and bus fare subsidies for the elderly and disabled to assist more than 130,000 vulnerable Fijians. Mr. Speaker, sir, this includes $55 million being allocated for the Social Pension Scheme, which will support 48,094 Fijians above the age of 65 with a monthly payment of $100. For the Poverty Benefit Scheme, which is targeted at providing income support to the poor and vulnerable, we are allocating $36 million to cover the cash transfer support ranging from $35 to $127 and a $50 food voucher for 27,490 Fijians. The $90 monthly disabled allowance will also continue with an allocation of $10.8 million, assisting around 9,400 Fijians. A further $11.3 million is allocated under the Child Protection Allowance to support vulnerable children. The bus fare support for the elderly and disabled persons will continue with a monthly top-up of $10. Can you please, Mr. Speaker, sir, I'm really getting distracted. Honorable Tambuya seems to be chatting away. I'm trying to deliver a budget address.
Honorable members, it's a normal procedure when the budget is delivered. It's listened to. You will have your turn for your debate in a week's time. Carry on.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Speaker, sir, a further $11.3 million is allocated under the Child Protection Allowance to support vulnerable children. The bus fare support for elderly and disabled persons will continue with a monthly top-up of $10 and a funding allocation of $5 million. A further $1 million is allocated for the food voucher program for rural pregnant women. Mr. Speaker, sir, overall funding for social protection initiatives has been reduced by a total of $4.2 million compared to the 2020-21 financial year. This isn't because we are scaling down, but because we're smartening up our controls to streamline the delivery of assistance. Through robust audits of recipients, we're making sure assistance reaches the people who really need it, so we can weed out bad actors who try to receive payments despite graduating to a higher level of income, or people who claim benefits in the name of someone who has in fact passed away, or those who simply are receiving payments from more than one assistance stream. Mr. Speaker, sir, we acknowledge the Australian Government for providing budget support to selected social welfare programs in the 2020-2021 financial year, and which will also be applied to the 2021-2022 financial year. Their faith in our disbursement of social welfare assistance assures us of their confidence in our systems. It was an Australian investment in our audit and IT systems that helped identify and disburse these assistance payments. Mr. Speaker, sir, government is subsidizing micro-insurance coverage for all social welfare recipients through the government micro-insurance program at a cost of $5.6 million per year. We've been doing it for the past 4 years. For the new insurance term, Mr. Speaker, sir, those eligible for term life and funeral benefits must be fully vaccinated by 1 November 2021. This insurance policy pays out in the event of death, fire, house fires and sickness, and vaccination, Mr. Speaker, sir, is in fact a requirement of the insurance companies given the severe risk of death due to COVID-19 if not vaccinated. Mr. Speaker, sir, socioeconomic stability for every home in Fiji starts at the tap. We need water that is clean and easily accessible, and to keep the taps flowing for those most vulnerable, the Fijian government will continue to provide free water to households with an annual household income of less than $30,000 for up to 92,500 litres of water. The same goes for access to electricity. 96% of Fijians have electricity thanks to years of steady investment. We didn't make those investments so that power would not be supplied in terms of hardship. Electricity is a pillar of a modern Fijian economy that cannot be allowed to crumble. For households earning an annual income of less than $30,000, we have been in fact providing for the past number of years a subsidy of 16.34 cents per unit for the 100 kilowatts of power users. Effective from 1 August 2021 to 31 January 2022, the Fijian government will pay the full cost of 34.01 cents for approximately 50,000 households at a total cost of $11 million. These are those who earn less than $30,000 a year. Like most everything else in this budget, Mr. Speaker, sir, this policy depends on vaccination rates climbing, so it will be reviewed in 6 months' time. Apart from this, Mr. Speaker, sir, subsidized domestic customers will get 6 weeks to pay the electricity bill without disconnection. Non-subsidized domestic customers will get 4 weeks for the bill payment. This extended bill payment will be provided for 6 months from 1 August 2021 to 31 January 2022 before it is reviewed. Mr. Speaker, sir, healing the wounds of this pandemic begins with supporting working Fijians to do what they do best, provide for themselves and participate in our economy. We don't have the same deep pockets as wealthier nations to pour trillions into the market to stimulate growth. We have to think a bit harder and do the best with what we have. And one of the better and smarter ways to do that is by decreasing the cost burden on businesses, sole traders and other Fijians to give them more financial breathing room. Tonight we have a very long list of what the government is prepared to pay on their behalf. Together, these reductions in fees and duties add up to serious daily savings for all Fijians and lend certainty at a time it has never been more sorely needed. Mr. Speaker, sir, to support all casual and full-time market vendors in Fiji and provide financial relief across the country, $2.6 million is allocated for the government to pay the full market stall fees for 1 year from 1 August 2021 to 31 July 2022 for the benefit of around 8,000 market vendors. We will disburse these funds to the respective municipal councils. So to all the Fijians listening, if you are selling in a market, your fees will be paid for 1 year from 1 August. You can keep more of your income, use it to sustain your family, use it to build your business, and lower your price if you think it helps you sell and earn more. Mr. Speaker, so in the same vein, government will pay inshore fishing license fees and other associated MSEF fees for the local fishing industry for the next 2 years for the benefit of all fishing license holders and registered boat owners with an allocation of $200,000 for the benefit of more than 3,000 license holders and boat owners. Registration fees, annual boat survey fees and boat master's license are also now valid for 5 years for fishing boats shorter than 15 meters as opposed to yearly licenses. To grant more certainty to fishers, we are also amending the Offshore Fisheries Management Act 2012 to extend the terms of offshore fishing licenses from 36 months to a maximum of 20 years. Fishing companies who will be licensed will have up 2 decades so you can make investments or take out loans that are more suited to a more certain timeline. They can invest more in new vessels and provide more jobs for Fijians. Mr. Speaker, sir, government will also provide a 5% subsidy for investment in fishing boats with value above $1 million to $2 million with a funding allocation of $500,000. If they buy a vessel for $1 million, they will get 5% of that paid for by government. To qualify, the company or the boat needs to be in accordance with low carbon standards. We want there to be more opportunity in our blue economy, but that does not come at the cost of rising emissions. We are a country committed to net zero emissions by mid-century, and we have to encourage the transition wherever there is an opportunity to do so. As more Fijians take advantage of these incentives to take up sustainable livelihoods in our blue economy, we expect income for our fishers and coastal communities to steadily rise, and we expect more young people to enter into the blue economy sector at different levels. So we will be taking commensurate steps to ensure traceability and value addition so that illegal fishing and other abuse of the environment and our blue economy is part of our overall effort to build back better, more sustainably and more inclusively. Mr. Speaker, sir, government will also pay for training and certification fees for those Fijians who wish to become seafarers through an allocation of $100,000. And Mr. Speaker, sir, a total of $500,000 or $500,000 has been allocated as a 50% partnership contribution for government for the purchase of a boat and engine for individuals and community groups in the outer islands, applicable to Lomaiviti, Lau, Yasawa, Rotuma, and to a lesser extent Kandavu and then the Mamanudas. This will be based on the number of fiberglass boats these communities have and available. And we all know traveling from one village to another in some of these outer islands is extremely expensive. And we want individuals to get into this business, or communities can get together. The average cost with the engine and a fiberglass boat ranges from $20,000 to $25,000. Government will pay 50% of that cost to the maximum of $10,000. This initiative will be available on an equitable basis to maritime islands based on the population size, the current fleet of fiberglass boats, and other factors. Mr. Speaker, sir, the Ministry of Itoke Affairs and the Ministry of Rural and Maritime Development will be the ones that will be coordinating this particular project. Mr. Speaker, sir, pandemic or not, many Fijians still need to drive to a shop or travel to a COVID-safe place of business. And fines and fees associated with driving can be unbudgeted gut punch for many unemployed Fijians awaiting the chance to work again. So we will be waiving the 50% additional penalty charged on traffic infringement notices, or TINs in short, for personal motor vehicle infringements incurred from 15 July 2021, or up to 15 July 2021, I should say, for unemployed Fijians. Nothing after this, but before this. These are for basic infringements such as overspeeding, red light, traffic infringement, and other infringements that do not involve illegal operations. These individuals will be given a grace period and will be able to come forward and make these payments. Mr. Speaker, sir, government will also put aside an allocation of $2.5 million to pay directly the base fees, Mr. Speaker, sir, for taxis, minibuses, carriers, and the buses that get charged by the municipal council every time they go to the bus stand for 1 year. Also to cushion the burden brought about by COVID-19 pandemic, because we know many taxis, minibuses, bus companies, they could not drive, they could not get an income. So for them to now operate, they have to incur these daily expenses. All of that will be taken care of by government for the next whole year. In relation to fees, we'll also be removing the LTA alteration records fee to make it easier for Fijians to change the records held by the LTA. Government will also pay the driving license and defensive driving fees course. Sorry, I'll say that again. Government will also pay the driving license and defensive driving fees for all taxi drivers, minibus drivers, bus drivers, and carrier drivers who are up for renewal in the next financial year, because it costs them a lot of money, and we know that they have not been driving for a long period of time. They need to get their licenses renewed, and we will pay that cost directly to LTA. In the same way, for the carriers, I forgot to mention, the carriers' base fees will also be paid for the 1 year. Also, government will pay the wheel tax and road diesel levy for tractors and golf carts for the next 12 months. Mr. Speaker, sir, we also looked at ways to improve enforcement of the law on our roads. To that effect, we are strengthening the powers of the LTA in relation to private vehicles illegally operating as taxis or minibuses by allowing LTA to auction off seized vehicles after conviction. Illegal taxis and minibuses are a significant problem on our roads right now, as they do not adhere to the same safety and conduct standards as registered PSVs. They also do not follow the COVID-safe protocols. It is our hope that by empowering LTA to sell off these vehicles, instead of simply returning them to perpetrators to continue carrying out these offences, we will sufficiently deter past and potential future offenders. Mr. Speaker, sir, we have identified practical areas in which Fijians can be assisted to ease everyday expenses. For example, from 1 August 2021, government will pay the over $50 medical report fee for all those who are required to submit such reports to employers for job applications. So they'll tell you to go and get a police report for you to get the job or apply for the job. It's a burden for them to pay the $50. Government will now pay the fees for them to the police force. Mr. Speaker, sir, similarly, those people who want medical reports, who want to go overseas, it costs them a few dollars, $50, $80, $120, depending on the report that they want. Again, government will pick up those fees for them, and we've allocated $100,000 for this. Mr. Speaker, sir, police reports are also required for those who go out to get a PSV driving license, including taxi drivers, bus drivers, minibus drivers, carrier drivers. Again, these fees will be paid for them for the next 12 months, and an allocation of $450,000 has been made. From 1st of August also, Mr. Speaker, sir, we will waive the birth certificate fees. So we want people, because there's a lot of requirements now for people to put in their birth certificate numbers. They want to go and get a birth certificate. Again, we'll defray those costs for them. They won't need to pay the fees. They can register their newborn children. And sometimes, as many people do so in Fiji, they don't register them until they're about to go to school. So we will waive those fees, Mr. Speaker, sir. Mr. Speaker, sir, government will pay surveyor fees for people who may be unable to afford to survey their land. There are some Fijians who currently live on state and Itoke land who do not have the funds to conduct the surveys, which is necessary to transition their lease agreement into a fully fledged registered lease, which could make them more financially stable. So government will allocate a total of $1 million to cover the cost of land surveys to help more landowners to make this obvious economic step up, and indeed the lessees too. Mr. Speaker, sir, government will also continue to provide medical services through general practitioners to Fijians who used to depend fully on the public health system for general outpatient services with an allocation of $5 million. This reduces the load on larger public hospitals, reduces the risk of larger hospitals being locked down due to COVID outbreaks, and supports these private GPs who have also been impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic. A total of 17 GP outlets are currently part of this initiative. Mr. Speaker, sir, for those eligible, the free medicine program will continue as well and will now apply to those people who visit these private GPs under the scheme. And Mr. Speaker, sir, as we announced in the last budget, the regulations are coming into effect in the next few days. Supermarkets will now be able to sell various vitamins and other types of supplements that currently only pharmacists sell and at a very exorbitant price. Mr. Speaker, sir, we will continue the Stronger Together Job Support Scheme on top of the assistance provided to those in the informal sector to provide actual opportunities for employment for Fijians with an allocation of $5 million. As announced last year, Mr. Speaker, sir, under this scheme, employers are granted a wage and guaranteed a wage subsidy by the government equivalent to the minimum wage rate of $2.68 an hour for a 3-month period when they employ eligible Fijians who did not have a job pre-COVID, and in particular those from the informal sector. Government has already paid out $3 million in this initiative since it began in November 2020. To date, some 48 employers have participated in the scheme, creating around 1,000 new jobs. Mr. Speaker, sir, to equip those that are unemployed with the new skills, we are providing also $1 million for retraining and reskilling through the Fiji National University. Mr. Speaker, sir, civil service salaries. We continued paying civil service salaries with no reduction for civil servants' pay below the level of the Permanent Secretary. We have continued to pay teachers even though they haven't conducted classes since the start of this outbreak. Even teachers on acting allowance have been paid during this period even though they have not been acting in a practical sense in those jobs. We've done this because we want to keep our teachers and make sure they're ready to go the extra mile when the schools reopen to help their students catch up on missed curriculum. Some civil servants who work from home on reduced hours or others who cannot work or attend work due to lockdown measures or home isolation protocols have also been paid in full. Mr. Speaker, sir, by supporting civil servants, we're doing more than looking out for our employees. We are supporting the families that rely on civil servants to provide for them. We are supporting the businesses they shop at, and we are supporting the economy as a whole. We are not making any cuts to civil service salaries in this budget. We are committed to making the civil service the premier employer of choice in Fiji. A good number of civil servants are working harder than ever to maintain government services, especially through this latest outbreak, and they should not and they will not see their salaries reduced. To save costs, we have frozen hiring for new positions in the civil service, except for, as mentioned earlier on, Mr. Speaker, sir, Ministries of Health and Medical Services, Communications, as well as the police force. However, Mr. Speaker, sir, when we do review this budget in 6 months' time, civil service salaries will carefully be reviewed in the event our borders do not reopen and our economy has not showed measured signs of revival. We have gone more than a year without making serious cuts to salaries. However, that commitment does hinge on government revenues being restored within 6 months, and that depends on more of us being vaccinated, including civil servants. Mr. Speaker, sir, We're proud that free education paved the way to equality of opportunity for young boys and girls in school. And there's clearly more we can and should be doing to make equality the reality for the young women of Fiji. In fact, there are more girls in school now than ever before. It's ludicrous, Mr. Speaker, sir, that in the 21st century, girls would miss a few precious learning days each month because they do not have access to sanitary pads. More so now when family incomes have declined significantly. So, Mr. Speaker, in this budget, government will provide sanitary pads to all female students from late primary school to year 13 through an allocation of $1.5 million. These students will be provided with vouchers in schools by the Ministry of Education, Heritage and Arts, which they can use to buy sanitary pads from supermarkets or other convenience stores. Around 55,000 female students from primary school to year 13 are expected to be assisted through these initiatives. Mr. Speaker, sir, this will also be able to help the Ministry of Health to have a more focus on young girls and young women reproductive health and be able to monitor their health. It also has an impact on where in some cases we have very early teenage pregnancies too. This will be a holistic approach to the health and the well-being of young females in our country. Mr. Speaker, sir, we want our girls and young women to know that even though resources are scarcer than usual for their government, their needs are at the very top of our priority list. Sanitary pads are not optional, they are essential. They will be made available to every female student who needs them. Mr. Speaker, sir, last year we made the most dramatic cuts to taxes on businesses ever. We cut fees and dropped duties, and these competitive measures will be maintained through this budget. We'll also be doing much more to aid Fijian companies of all sizes. Today we are announcing working capital support of $200 million in the form of loans to help Fijian businesses meet their operational needs. Government will fully subsidize borrowers' interest cost on these loans for the first 2 years, with a total funding of $8 million in the 2021-2022 budget, and additional funding of $8 million in the following budget. Businesses who take advantage of this program, Mr. Speaker, sir, will have the freedom to use this assistance where they need it most. They can borrow this money to pay for wages and salaries, rents, utilities, purchase stocks, or cover any other working capital needs and operational needs. We trust companies to know what they need. Existing micro businesses with turnover of less than $50,000 will be eligible for maximum loan funding of $10,000. Small businesses with annual turnover of $50,000 to $300,000 will be eligible for maximum loan of funding of $20,000, while medium-sized businesses with annual turnover of $300,000 to $1.25 million are eligible for maximum loan of $50,000. Large businesses with turnover of more than $1.25 million can access up to $100,000 in loans. Mr. Speaker, sir, under this facility, we are targeting assistance toward nearly 20,000 businesses in Fiji. Mr. Speaker, sir, put in simple terms, this is how the scheme will work. The Reserve Bank of Fiji will provide special funding of $200 million at an interest rate of 0.25% that can be accessed by commercial banks, FDB, and other licensed credit institutions. These financial institutions will lend these funds at no more than 3.99%. All of this, in our discussion with the banks, will allow these banks to make these loans only interest loan payments for the first 2 years. That means for the first 2 years, none of these businesses will pay anything because government will pay the interest for the first 2 years. The beauty is that these loans cannot become bad or default for the first 2 years because the banks have agreed to interest-free and we will pay the interest for these companies because debt services will always be current. This gives our businesses 2 full years to stabilize and recover, if necessary, before they start the loan repayments from year 3 onwards. Mr. Speaker, sir, furthermore, to encourage the banks to lend, we know that some of these loans can go bad. So for the comfort of the financial institutions, government will guarantee 90% of the loan for the micro businesses through the RBF scheme, 85% for the small businesses, 80% for the medium-sized businesses, and 75% for the larger businesses. If I'm a microfinance enterprise or entrepreneur and I borrow $7,000. The first 2 years, I don't make any repayments because government is paying my interest rate for me. In the following year, after the 2 years, I keep on running my business. If for some odd reason I'm unable to pay the $7,000 loan, assuming it's $5,000 by now, 90% of that loan, if it goes bad, will be paid by government to the financial institution. This encourages financial institutions to lend more. We have allocated $5 million in the 2021-2022 budget for RBF to manage the guarantee. Further allocations will be made over the years to ensure that sufficient funding is held at the RBF to cater for any future defaults. Mr. Speaker, sir, we are also going to assist micro, small and medium enterprises. They have been hit hardest by our targeted lockdowns to contain the virus. We are going to ease their financial burden to give them even more breathing room to grow and do well. Effective from 1 August for a period of 6 months, MSMEs with a turnover of less than $1.25 million that are paying commercial electricity rates will now pay residential rates, with the government subsidizing the difference. This is expected to assist over 18,700 MSMEs. $7 million has been allocated for this initiative. To put it practically, a person who runs a coffee shop has to turn on the coffee machine even if they're making 100 cups of coffee or 5 cups of coffee. So electricity cost is still there. We will now subsidize the electricity cost for them because they'll only pay the private connectivity rates. Apart from this, Mr. Speaker, sir, commercial customers that fall under this particular scheme will get 4 weeks to pay the electricity bill without disconnection. This extended bill payment will be provided for the next 6 months from 1 August 2021 to 31 January 2022. Mr. Speaker, sir, we know that businesses, particularly in the tourism sector, have had their vehicles parked due to border closures. So we'll be waiving all arrears for vehicles that have been off the road and have accumulated fees and charges. In other words, if my vehicle has been off the road for 2 years, when I go and re-register the vehicle, LTA under the current law will require me to pay the wheel tax and other levies even though the vehicle has been off the road. So we are amending the law where they don't have to do that whilst the vehicle has been off the road. From 1 August 2021 to 31 July 2022, the owners of these vehicles will be able to come forward and and register the vehicles without having to pay the accumulated fees and charges. This will also apply to individual cars that have been off the road. They can come and re-register the vehicles without having to pay for the period when the vehicle has been off the road. These include annual registration, licensing fees, road user levy and the ACCF levy. This applies also, as I said, to all individuals. We'll also be amending the LTA Act, Mr. Speaker, sir, to address gaps in the Act that have historically been a cause for concern for the tourism industry. The Act does not allow hotels that own vehicles registered as commercial vehicles to carry guests. This issue has been dealt with over the years through exemptions. However, we'll be patching up these gaps in the Act to ensure that when our tourism industry is back up and running smoothly again, we have a more secure legal framework in place. Mr. Speaker, sir, we have reviewed the current taxi operations framework and will be rolling out a new system to increase efficiency. We'll be removing municipal taxi bases and stands and replacing them with a new concept of open taxi ranks, except of course those who have private property, which will allow taxis to operate more freely and efficiently within their zones. With the removal of municipal taxi bases and stands, we'll also be removing the various base stand and station fees that the public service vehicle permit holders currently pay. That covers taxi drivers, bus drivers and minibus drivers, and replacing them with an annual PSV levy paid for by all PSV permit holders except rental permit holders. And those who have paid these fees already will be reimbursed. The new PSV levy will be collected and placed in a specific trust fund that will be used for the development and maintenance of PSV bases, stands and stations. Mr. Speaker, sir, improving the national balance of trade is a crucial part of our economic recovery. To support local exporters, government will pay Biosecurity Authority of Fiji fees on all exports for 12 months, effective from 1 August 2021, with a total funding of $1.1 billion. Mr. Speaker, sir, the commission rate charged by Vodafone to bus companies for e-ticketing will be reduced from 4.5% to 3.5%. This will assist bus operators, which are now operating at half capacity due to COVID-safe protocols. Government, through the Ministry of Transport and Communications, will roll out the e-ticketing system in very soon to minibuses, taxis and ferry services from 2022. Security companies that have to apply for licenses to operate security companies, or individual security officers that have to apply for licenses through the Ministry of Defence, we will pay their fees for the next 1 year. Mr. Speaker, sir, giving citizens the ability to access the FNPF funds to help them through the pandemic has provided a lifeline for many families and injected needed cash into the Fijian economy. We are introducing a number of measures to continue that flexibility for FNPF members while preserving the integrity of FNPF's essential function as a superannuation fund and make it healthier as we go forward. FNPF members between the ages of 50 and 54 with balances of up to $10,000 will now be able to withdraw all remaining funds from the FNPF account. They don't have to wait till 55. And these are for those people who have $10,000 or less. This will provide some form of financial support for decisions regarding their livelihood, for example, setting up a small business, paying off any bank loans or hire purchase payments. In addition to this, Mr. Speaker, sir, FNPF members affected by COVID-19 will also be able to withdraw up to $10,000 for business-related purposes from several accounts, from the general account. This is expected to inject up to $30 million in the economy. There are some people who worked for 20 years, perhaps in a hotel, and they opened up a restaurant at the age of 35 or 40. They now have some problems with it. They can access funds up to $10,000 from the general account. Mr. Speaker, sir, we are also will increase the FNPF employer and employee contribution from 5% to 6% from 1 January 2022 to 31 December 2022. For more than a year now, FNPF members' accounts have received contributions at a lower rate. This 1% reversal for both employers and employees should yield a total of around $40 million accredited to members' accounts. Government will gradually revert the contribution rate to a total of 18% in the coming years. An employer, however, who chooses to contribute more than 6% of the statutory mandatory contribution, up to 10%, will be allowed to deduct 300% of that contribution from their taxes, and that additional income in the pockets of the employee will be exempt from income tax. Family care leave and paternity leave will be reduced from 2 days to 1 day effective from 1 August 2021 until the end of the COVID-19 period. Mr. Speaker, sir, many businesses have provided employees leave with pay through the past several months, and the burden of family care and paternity leave benefits is too much to ask of many struggling businesses through this period. Again, if we achieve our vaccination targets, we will be in a good position to restore these paid days off for employees. Mr. Speaker, sir, FNPF has also extended the COVID-19 home loan assistance until 31 September 2021 for moratoriums dated after 31 March 2021. This assistance will enable members to dip into their preserved account to help pay their mortgage or make monthly repayments. Members can access 100% of the general account and 50% of the preserved account. By June 2021, more than 1,900 members, Mr. Speaker, sir, had taken advantage of this assistance with a total value of $15.3 million. Mr. Speaker, sir, FNPF has also credited full interest of around $297 million for the financial year ending 30 June 2021 to 389,986 members' accounts. Starting 1 August, any interest credited by FNPF will be directed into the members' general balances, which of course they can withdraw under those circumstances that we have just highlighted. Mr. Speaker, sir, cash flow pressure in these challenging times are a given. To help ease the overhead cost of businesses that pay rent, an increased tax deduction of 200% from the current 100% will be available to landlords for the amount of commercial rent reduced. This applies to reduction of rent payable from 1 August 2021 to 31 July 2022. We are providing this incentive to make rent reductions as easy and as obvious of an option as possible for landlords. We cannot make you lower the rents, and we cannot force you to keep your tenants, but we can appeal to your good sense by aligning tax incentives to encourage rent reductions. And we urge you to consider your long-term relationship and your reputation among those who rent from you now and those who may or may not choose to rent from you in the future. Your compassion through this crisis will always be remembered. Just the same, if you choose to be cruel and callous, they'll never be forgotten. Mr. Speaker, sir, The tourism sector typically brings in over $2 billion in foreign exchange every year, providing thousands of jobs and income-generating opportunities, and endearing people around the world to our people and to our country. With the industry at a virtual standstill, we left without one of our great economic engines. Our comeback must be coordinated if we are to seize our share of the global industry's rebound. The commitment of tourism workers and operators to be vaccinated is a powerful show of what our cooperation can achieve. We have your back all the way towards your industry's recovery. Apart from the large reductions in tourism sector taxes last year, which will remain, we are providing additional tax incentives to encourage more operators to build this industry better in preparation of the reopening of the borders. Under a short life investment package, or SLIP as commonly known, new hotel investment projects are offered 5 years income tax holiday for capital investments from $250,000 to $1 million, a 7-year tax holiday for investments between $1 million to $2 million, and a 13-year tax holiday for capital investments exceeding $2 million. To further incentivize new investments in hotels, a 20-year income tax holiday will be offered for investments over $40 million. Customs duty exemption will continue to be provided on all capital goods, including capital equipment, plant and machinery equipment, building materials, furnishings and fittings, room amenities, kitchen and dining equipment, and specialized water equipment. Mr. Speaker, sir, we are also extending the tax holiday to existing hotels. For refurbishment and renovations above $2 million, a 5-year tax holiday will be available with associated customs duty concessions. The 25% investment allowance currently available to existing hotels will be increased to 50% to assist with renovations and refurbishment. Duty concessions will also be provided under Code 245 of the Customs Tariff. Mr. Speaker, sir, in 2020-2021 budget, we had announced a $60 million allocation for the Fiji Recovery Rebate Package, which was not used because the borders remained closed. For this budget, we are providing an allocation of $40 million under this package. Tourism Fiji is provided an operating grant of $6.2 million and a marketing grant of $20 million. The Fiji Recovery Rebate Package of the $40 million will be managed by Fiji Airways. We are also allocating $3.5 million to provide an insurance scheme for incoming tourists with a maximum cover of $10,000 for quarantine expenses, health care support, and changes to travel dates in the event that these tourists upon arrival into Fiji test positive for COVID-19. In case somebody comes here for a holiday, they get sick because of COVID-19, the airline tickets have to be changed, they don't have any money, we have insurance cover for this. And various other expenses if the Fijian government has to bear those expenses. This is all in preparation for the reception of tourists. Mr. Speaker, sir, government had provided a guarantee of $455 million to Fiji Airways to sustain itself following the closure of borders. Mr. Speaker, sir, Parliament had also approved a one-off fee of 50% to be paid for Fiji Airways. Fiji Airways now, Mr. Speaker, sir, is issuing additional shares, and the Fijian government has also allocated $7.6 million in this budget for the purchase of additional equity in Fiji Airways to keep our shareholding intact. Mr. Speaker, sir, COVID is likely to become an endemic disease around the world, with cases continuing to pop up in different areas at different times. We expect more cases in Fiji. We expect them tomorrow. We expect them in years from now. When we have widespread vaccine-induced immunity, we protect against severe disease and death. Until such a time, employers who continue to pay their employees who have tested positive for the virus and in isolation will be eligible for a 300% tax deduction. A letter from the Ministry of Health and Medical Services is required to confirm the positive test and isolation order. Mr. Speaker, sir, government will also provide household packs. We'll continue to provide household packs for Fijians who, upon the Ministry of Health and Medical Services, have gone into isolation after testing positive or being identified as a primary or secondary contact of an infected person. The provision of household packs is currently outsourced to New World Supermarket and Shop and Save Supermarket. This is aligned with government's objective of creating employment and economic activity, and also COVID awareness and adherence through the outsourcing and engagement of the private sector. Government will also continue to provide health care through general practitioners so that Fijians who depend on public health systems and general outpatient services, as I highlighted earlier, can receive free medical services. Mr. Speaker, sir, we will now be outsourcing and we will be advertising for diagnostic laboratories and imaging facilities to accredited healthcare providers. Successful providers will need to have proven expertise to operate maintain and provide biomedical services such as MRI scan, CT scans, X-ray center, dental X-ray, OPG, mammograms, bone densitometer and radiology services. Mr. Speaker, sir, we can no longer be able to bear the significant upfront capital costs and continuing costs. So outsourcing is a lot better. Many countries have adopted this. So for example, recently we paid out I think over $500,000 because the scanner at CWM did not work, so we had to direct our patients to super private. What it does now, Mr. Speaker, sir, the whole model it's based on is if we call for tenders and somebody is expected to provide an MRI machine, they don't just provide the machine. They operate the machine, they make sure the air conditioning is working. If there's a software upgrade, they make sure it's done. They have the operator and they have an uptime of a certain percentage. If it goes below a particular uptime, they have to pay penalties, and many companies are interested in that. So we will be able to use those services 24/7. Mr. Speaker, sir, the compulsory implementation of the VMS will be deferred for an additional 2 years to 1 January 2024. However, for businesses who wish to voluntarily implement VMS now, government will provide a 300% tax deduction on the implementation cost. Although it is voluntary, we encourage businesses who can register and implement VMS now to do so. VAT deferral, Mr. Speaker, sir. Government will implement structural changes in the current VAT regime to ease pressure on businesses. First, the payment of VAT at the point of import for gold card taxpayers will be deferred for 2 months. Cash flow pressure is one of the major challenges businesses are facing because of COVID-19, and this will provide much needed relief. We are currently allowing this for gold card taxpayers, but will be extended later to other compliant taxpayers. Mr. Speaker, sir, currently the export income deduction incentive is 60% of all export income. This currently will expire in 2022. This incentive, Mr. Speaker, sir, will now be extended for an additional 3 years and will now expire at the end of December 2024. If you're an exporter, your incentive is up to 60%. However, for agriculture and fisheries and forest, the export income deduction is now increased from 60% to 90%, which means that 90% of the export income will not be taxed and will continue to be incentivized through this extension as we seek to bring more cash into the economy and grow our primary services sector. Mr. Speaker, sir, currently debt forgiveness is not subject to income tax for all outstanding debt forgiven from 1 April 2020 to 31 December 2021. Mr. Speaker, sir, government will now extend this period to 31 December 2022. This will incentivize parent companies to forgive debt and help highly leveraged companies operate during these difficult times. This flows on to thin capitalization. The debt to equity ratio is increased from 2:1 to 3:1 in the 2020-2021 budget. This allowed for a higher amount of tax deductibility in relation to interest allowed for foreign controlled Fijian companies. This incentive will continue until 31 December 2022. Mr. Speaker, sir, we have partnered with the Fiji Institute of Accountants, the Fiji Chamber of Commerce and Industry, the Fiji Commerce and Employees Federation, and Women in Business for assessment and disbursement of the concession loan to MSMEs. We are taking this collaboration to the next level. $250,000 will be allocated to provide training and advisory services to assist MSMEs with the newly announced COVID-19 Recovery Credit Guarantee Scheme. We've never offered anything like this to MSMEs before, and it will provide an opportunity to support business leaders in the MSME sector to better understand loan packages and build up their credit potential so they can continue to make investments that grow their business. So this Business Assistance Fiji grant, Mr. Speaker, sir, will be a conglomeration of all these organizations that will help these small businesses to draw up their cash flows, draw up their cash plans, to be able to apply for loans, and it will become a permanent fixture, and we're funding them to set it up. Mr. Speaker, sir, we are going to press the renegotiation of the double taxation agreement we have in place with Australia and New Zealand to modernize our tax treaty articles. Generally, we are seeking provisions that ensure our tax incentives are reciprocated in Australia and New Zealand, so they are meaningful for companies looking to trade with Fiji and invest in Fiji. We've already resolved one long-running dispute as FRCS no longer imposes withholding tax on professional service fees for residents of Australia and New Zealand, in Fiji. Government will allocate $5 million in the budget to issue refunds to Australian and New Zealand residents who have paid this withholding tax. The Tax Administration Act will be amended to clarify this refund process, which FRCS will expedite. FRCS will also issue a practice guideline in this respect. Mr. Speaker, sir, to ease tax obligations on individuals and businesses, a tax amnesty will be granted to taxpayers with tax arrears, waiving all penalties upon payment of real taxes. To qualify for the amnesty, taxpayers must make payment arrangements within 3 months from 1 August 2021 and make payments before 30 June 2022. Mr. Speaker, sir, businesses that were able to quickly adapt and incorporate online trading and digital payment platforms during this pandemic have fared significantly better than ones that continued to use traditional business models. Unfortunately, with limited capital at their disposal and with commercial banks placing very onerous and almost prohibitive fees in place for MSMEs, these businesses have been one of the hardest hit. To build MSMEs, build greater resilience and business continuity for the future, and to jumpstart this sector, government in collaboration with RBF will assist MSMEs that sign up as a merchant on Vodafone's VT Card e-commerce platform to offer their products for sale online. The $1.2 million is allocated to fund this partnership. Mr. Speaker, sir, funds will be channeled towards covering the costs associated with getting MSMEs onto the VT Card platform, receiving payment through internet payment gateways. Essentially what this means, Mr. Speaker, sir, if I run a small bakery in Nambua and I want to be able to sell my cakes online, I can go onto VT Card. At the moment there's an upfront cost and a monthly fee. We will pay for that through the RBF and I can advertise my cakes. We have a soldier in UK that wants to buy a cake for his mother. He can pay for the cake through the VT Card platform and she will get paid for the cake and she'll deliver the cake to the lady. At the moment, this lady who runs the cake shop in Nambua has got no opportunity in tapping onto the business. Because if she goes to the bank and says, I want a payment gateway, the bank will say, give me $20,000 deposit up front and maybe another $10,000 or $15,000 later, then she gets a payment gateway. With the VT Card platform, it's applicable to all businesses, small businesses. We'll pay for that cost for her to sign on to that and the monthly fees to the RBF. Mr. Speaker, sir, Vodafone has also agreed to reduce the monthly fee by 50% and post fees also agreed to reduce delivery charges because you need people to deliver it. This ready-built e-commerce platform with integrated M-Pesa mobile wallet and Visa and MasterCard payment gateways means businesses signing up on VT Card will not be required to make any investment in any online platform or payment solutions to offer their products for sale online. Mr. Speaker, sir, government will also assist MSMEs to install mobile money transfer service and internet payment gateways. Mr. Speaker, sir, we will also assist and have allocated funding for little shops to sign on to the M-Pesa. Because as we will be disbursing over $200 million through M-Pesa and MyCash, we want all the corner shops to have M-Pesa capacity. And the monthly fees for that, we will actually pay for that for the next 1 year in conjunction with Vodafone. So people have more opportunity rather than having to queue up in a line to get cash out, they can actually simply go and tap their phone on the QR code and be able to pay for things directly. Mr. Speaker, sir, to further support e-commerce, government will provide a 200% tax deduction incentive for investment into development and upgrade of online shopping websites and platforms. Agriculture loan interest subsidy. Mr. Speaker, sir, the Fijian government will increase its interest rate subsidy for agriculture loans by the Fiji Development Bank from 6% to 8% and increase the loan limit for the subsidy from $50,000 to $100,000. An allocation of $2 million will be provided in the 2020-2021 budget for this initiative. Currently, for example, FDB provides agriculture loans at interest rates of 11 to 12%. On average, 6% is subsidized by the government, which means people who had agriculture loans were paying an average interest rate of 6%. The increase of the government subsidy from 6% to 8% will further reduce the borrower's average interest rate to 4%. We hope, and working with the Ministry of Agriculture, will incentivize more investment in the agriculture sector as we diversify the economy. Government is allocating $4 million for the Ethiopia Land Development Program, which helps Ethiopia landowners develop the land for residential and commercial purposes. Currently, there are 9 projects being carried out under Ethiopia Land Development Program. Once all the projects are completed, there will be a total of 284 lots, 270 residential lots and 14 non-residential lots available for leasing, a total land area of 51.4 hectares. Development works have already been completed. Savani, Warambita, Nasongele, Vunda and Yandua subdivisions. Yandua is climate resilient with underground cabling through EFL, and the other ones in Someni and Warambithia will also be made climate resilient. And also we have the one in Tailevu. These are already available. We already have people now ringing up, inquiring, wanting to buy these lots. This will be a huge windfall for the landowners who participated in this particular program. The draft valuation reports for the completed sites are ranging from $550,000 to $125,000 per lot in lot sizes in the 3 to 1 acre lots in Yandua. We'll be phasing out duty protections for Fiji Dairy Limited in the lead up to the expiration of the agreement between the government and the Southern Cross Foods Limited on 31 August 2022. Duty will be reduced to 5% after expiry of the agreement on cheese, yogurt, liquid and powdered milk and butter, but at the same time we'll be providing targeted assistance to our dairy farmers. Suburban shuttle stations. Mr. Speaker, sir, Fijians of course need more options to travel. We want them to use less of their cars, and currently the bus system is not very flexible in respect of the manner in which the routes actually have been or were allocated literally decades ago. For example, we've seen from Nambua all the way to 9 miles, huge pockets of people live in that area. We have little business and commercial centers develop in this area. If you live in Nepani, you actually cannot catch a bus to come up to Valelevu because the bus route does not cross the highway. You cannot go from Valelevu inside to Omkar Road. No bus runs in that way. So, Mr. Speaker, sir, to also reduce our carbon footprint, to get more people having access to affordable transportation, the garment factory lady who works in Nandera, if she wants to at lunchtime go across and make a payment to a housing authority or go around and visit the doctor at Valelevu Health Center, she has to catch a taxi. There's no bus that runs directly. So we will now be setting up what we call suburban shuttle stations in Valelevu, in Nakasi, and around the Tawakubu area in Lotoka. Essentially, we'll be allowing what we call 21-seater buses to every 5-10 minutes run within this area, taking people from one commercial center to other commercial center, crossing across the highway, the major routes, making transportation a lot more easier, reducing our carbon footprint, getting people across to the business centers a lot more easily. The Valelevu grounds is very easy grounds. In fact, it's already been compacted, and to have the station set up there will create a lot of convenience for those people who live in that particular area. And also they don't actually have to leave their suburbs. And an allocation, Mr. Speaker, sir, of $2 million has been made in this respect. Mr. Speaker, sir, as we said, we needed more eggs in our economic basket. That is why new investments exceeding $10 million in infrastructure that supports business processing outsourcing companies like call centers and accounting services will be offered a 20-year tax holiday. A 10-year and 15-year tax holiday will also be available for investments between $2 million to $5 million and $5 million to $10 million respectively. Customs duty exemptions will also be provided as part of this incentive package. This incentive package will be extended to investors that derive 90% of income from an ICT business. If the investor is also involved in developing strata tiles and selling to ICT or BPO operators, the sale proceeds will also be exempt from income taxes. This more attractive tax incentives will also be extended to BPO operators. Mr. Speaker, sir, we see enormous potential in the BPO area. The age range of people who work in the centers are between the age of 20 and 35. A lot of them are university students who work part-time. Some of them, of course, work full-time. And the BPO Council, Mr. Speaker, sir, is working very closely with government to try and get more investors in this space, get more businesses in this space. And accordingly, government is going to give a grant of $200,000 to the Business Processing Outsourcing Council to develop the BPO sector. The remote work revolution can come to Fiji, Mr. Speaker, sir. We have a workforce, we have the data accessibility, we have the incentives in place to do extremely well in this industry, and we are also told that our people have neutral accents with everybody in the world being able to understand us very easily. Mr. Speaker, sir, we'll also expand the TFR incentive to Tamavua, a specific lot in Tamavua, where the Telecom Fiji Limited, together with ATH, under the umbrella of ATH, is developing a ICT park. As you know, this is the land next to the American Embassy. All of that entire site used to belong to PNT many years ago. It's government land. It's the highest peak in Suva. So if there's any tsunami, if that gets underwater, then we're in trouble. But the tsunami won't be able to reach to that high point. So a lot of people will be putting their disaster recovery systems and software at that particular site. And we're giving Telecom Fiji a 20-year tax holiday for investments in that space. Tied in with that currently, Mr. Speaker, sir, we have only one submarine cable that lands in Fiji, the Southern Cross cable that connects Australia to Fiji to the west coast of North America. All of these Zoom meetings that we are having, Mr. Speaker, sir, is through this Southern Cross cable. Of course, if tomorrow there's a volcano in the middle of the ocean, in the Pacific Ocean, northern or southern Pacific Ocean, and the cable goes, we'll be completely disconnected. We'll only be able to rely on satellite communication, which is also very expensive. So, Mr. Speaker, so in order to attract more cables to land in this part of the world, we're offering a 30-year tax holiday because these investments runs into tens of millions of dollars with a lot of duty concession package to any company that lands a network submarine cable, in particular if we're going to invest in the BPO sector. There is, as I said, Mr. Speaker, sir, an existing cable in space. This pursuit of new development is also about building redundancy and bringing faster internet speeds at lower cost throughout Fiji. The Ministry of Communication, Mr. Speaker, is providing increased funding of $54.6 million. This includes $15.5 million for Wailesi, which includes $4.5 million for the FM project, which will provide robust and reliable communication services nationwide. Wailesi has changed the game for mobile accessibility in Fiji, putting news and entertainment television in the palms and pockets of Fijians everywhere in the country. And we understand also that one of the free-to-air television stations, FBC, will be showing the game tomorrow night, and people will be able to watch it on their phones through using Wailesi platform. We are also providing $4.7 million to Digital Fiji to continue the digitalization of government services, and $6.7 million for online business construction licensing system. An additional $2.9 million is provided to strengthen the storage and server capacity of government ITC services. Mr. Speaker, sir, amendments to biosecurity. Government, in conjunction with Biosecurity Authority of Fiji, is reviewing the fees and charges under the regulations to directly address the ease of doing business for services provided by BAF. A charge for the rapid risk analysis pathways has been introduced to improve the timeline of market access by the importer. New products from existing pathways will be easier to import through the introduction of RAP. Furthermore, RAP will cost significantly less than other import risk analysis, such as the desktop import risk analysis, and will take only 1 or 2 months to complete. Mr. Speaker, sir, it's very interesting that the Biosecurity Act will also be able to recognize vessel or aircraft clearance agents. This will make the agents more accountable. Secondly, will require that new regulation under the Act will be made in consultation with stakeholders. Mr. Speaker, sir, the Food Export and Marketing Act of 1906 will be revised to allow the Biosecurity Authority of Fiji to issue a fruit exporter's license as opposed to going through the older process. Town and planning requirements, Mr. Speaker, sir, will be amending the general provisions for town planning schemes and areas to enable high density development, with particular emphasis on revising plot ratio, reducing the setback for double-story buildings, and minimum lot size requirements. This will also allow developers to build on-site sewage systems. Mr. Speaker, sir, Government will present a Financial Management Amendment Bill to amend and update the Financial Management Act of 2004. The amendment bill strengthens controls, increases transparency by mandating a fiscal strategy, and introduces new legal requirements for procurement and cash management. For the first time, internal audits will be backed by a legal mandate. The amended bill has revised principles of responsible fiscal management. The amendment bill will also require the Minister for Economy to issue a pre-election economic fiscal update. This provides more transparency by providing a detailed update on the state of the economy moving into a campaign period. Furthermore, the bill will entail consequential amendments to the 2014 Electoral Act, requiring political parties, political candidates, and people representing parties and candidates that make financial commitments or promises to the Fijian public that they provide a written explanation of how the promises or commitments are to be met. No more pie-in-the-sky policy promises, Mr. Speaker, sir. Transparency cuts both ways, and Fijians deserve to know how every political party actually plans to do what they say they will do. Mr. Speaker, sir, we're also tightening financial controls within government to ensure we keep operations on budget. Permanent secretaries and agency heads are under strict instructions to operate within their budgetary allocations and avoid any unnecessary movement of funds within ministries. We used to offer more flexibility to PSs to wire funds throughout the financial year, but unfortunately, Mr. Speaker, sir, we find some permanent secretaries wiring funds from Seg 1. In other words, using the staff allocation for payment of salaries as a slush fund. That will all stop. We will bring an amendment to the environment regulations to ensure that whatever is set out in the budget is spent exactly in that particular allocation. Mr. Speaker, sir, in this budget, the Fijian government is allocating $5 million to facilitate the adoption of FPOS by all government ministries and agencies. All ministries and departments will now be able to provide more convenient payment solutions to its clients, who are the citizens of this Fiji. This will make transacting business with government faster and easier for citizens and businesses alike. The rollout will initially target ministries with the highest volume of transactions, such as the Ministry of Lands, Ministry of Justice, Ministry of Health, Department of Immigration and Police, before rolling out to all other agencies. We are also looking at rolling out Internet Payment Gateway and digital money wallets under this initiative. With the passing of the National Payment Scheme, which this Parliament passed earlier this year, government is actively discussing with RBF and commercial banks ways to expeditiously make bank accounts interoperable with digital wallets. Mr. Speaker, sir, we need to do a better job of getting ships in and out of our harbours and the cargoes are unloaded quickly, so we're exempting foreign cargo ships from arduous process of acquiring coasting trade permits. Instead, they will simply be able to notify FRCS 48 hours before they sail to a Fijian port or Fijian ports. They will not be permitted to transport goods from one domestic port to another, but they will be able to bring international goods to ports in Fiji and take Fijian goods out of Fiji to international ports. Mr. Speaker, sir, furthermore, the Maritime Transport Act will be amended to enable AMSEF to issue licenses instead of having to go through the ministry itself. This is, Mr. Speaker, sir, to ensure that licenses are vetted clearly in a timely manner and that, of course, the drawn-out processes and the bureaucracy gets removed. We are also removing a number of marine regulations, removing the requirement to obtain a permit to take items on board. At the moment, for example, if you're a foreign fishing boat and you come to Suva Port and you want to take some food on board, you actually have to get a permit. If you want to refuel your vessel, you actually have to get a permit. Other countries in the world do not have that requirement. So we'll be removing those requirements to make Fijian ports a lot more attractive, or more open for business. There have been some really amazing situations at the moment. For example, under the quarantine rules, if a vessel turns up to a port after sunset, you cannot actually go and do a quarantine clearance. Quarantine clearance under the existing laws says you can only do it in daylight hours. So all of that will be removed. None of the ports in the Pacific actually have that. They actually they do the quarantine inspections at any time of the day, 24 hours, and so we'll be repealing all of these requirements. Mr. Speaker, sir, again, as I mentioned, the requirements for provisioning and bunkering to seek permits for that will be removed. This will enable ships to refuel and restock without undergoing a time-consuming permit process. This is aligned to government's goal of reducing bureaucracy and improving the ease of doing business. Mr. Speaker, sir, again, we'll be removing a number of requirements and to help, in fact, effect further efficiencies under the quarantine regulations. Mr. Speaker, sir, to obtain the written consent of Director of Lands or TLTB takes any time between days to a few months. There is a huge backlog of applications which have not been dealt with to date, and we receive frequent complaints from members of the public on these delays. The Lands Department TLTB is simply not acceptable, and a lot of it is very paper-driven. We are therefore amending the State Lands Act and the Itaukei Lands Trust Act 1940 to ensure that written consent is no longer required for a mortgage, charge, pledge or caveat for any state or Itaukei lease to be dealt with by any court of law or under process of any court of law. Furthermore, lessees and tenants will no longer need to apply for written consent from the Land Department or Lands Department TLTB for water and electricity connections. These amendments will ensure faster service delivery to lessees and third parties will no longer need to obtain the consent of the Lands Department TLTB for certain applications, and they can directly register instruments with the Register of Titles or lodge proceedings in court. Consent is still required, however, for dealings such as sale, transfer, subleasing, assignment, subletting, building, rezoning, and so forth, because there's an impact directly on the lessors. However, with the ones that we are proposing, there's no impact on the lease terms or the conditions or indeed the payment. However, with these amendments that we are proposing, consent can only be refused where there is a breach of any lease condition or the application is not in accordance with law. Mr. Speaker, sir, to support the livelihoods of Fijians in the sugar industry, we provided a 3-year minimum guaranteed cane price of $85 per tonne. That was in addition to support improved farm productivity, the fertilizer subsidy, cane farm development assistance, carter subsidy, upgrade of cane access roads, weedicide subsidy, and other assistance. Today we are announcing, Mr. Speaker, sir, that we will extend this minimum guaranteed price of $85 per tonne for the 2021 season, making this the 4th year of guaranteed cane price. We understand the plight of our farmers and government stands behind them. This cane price will also be extended to the 2022 season, Mr. Speaker, sir. We thank the farmers for the trust they have had in this government. We thank them for starting their harvesting, knowing full well that this government will not leave them behind. We have always supported the sugar industry and we always will. We also thank our cane farmers and all the industry stakeholders who did not succumb to the self-interested call for a boycott. Our farmers knew very well, Mr. Speaker, sir, that a harvesting boycott could never be in their interest. It could only serve the interests of those who would use our cane farmers for political gain, taking advantage of their vulnerability and using them as political pawns. Mr. Speaker, sir, the Ministry of Sugar is provided funding of $72 million in the 2021 and 2022 budget. This includes a funding allocation of around $47 million for the sugarcane price support. This includes around $22.9 million for the additional top-up payment required for the 2020 season, and the $24.1 million to pay for the minimum guaranteed price of $85 per tonne for the 2021 season. The remaining funding requirements for $8 million dependent on the cane harvest for the 2021 season will be provided in the 2022-2023 budget to meet the final payment for the 2021 season. Apart from this, Mr. Speaker, sir, government will continue to provide the fertilizer subsidy to farmers at a rate of $25.59 per bag, with a total funding allocation of $15.6 million. This means that farmers will only continue to pay a price of $20 per bag of fertilizer. Apart from this, $3.8 million is provided for the cane cartage subsidy from Penang to Rarawai Mill. A further $3.3 million is provided for cane access roads, sugarcane development, farmer assistance, weedicide subsidy, and new farmer assistance. Mr. Speaker, sir, we, however, do need to take a long-term view of the sugar industry. No one really talks about this, but the world price of sugar is low, and Fiji's lack of large commercial sugar farms means our growers would have low or near zero returns without a government guaranteed price. We need to find a viable agricultural alternative that offers real livelihoods for some of these farmers. Even with a guaranteed price of $85 per tonne, Mr. Speaker, sir, for example, the net income of a farmer who harvests 100 tonnes of cane averages less than $3,000 a year. And more than 40% of our growers harvest less than 100 tonnes. 40% harvest only less than 100 tonnes. Even for a farmer that harvests 300 tonnes, the net payout on average is $7,500. Almost 3/4 of our farmers harvest less than 300 tonnes. That's the annual income, and it's paid 4 times over 4 periods. These farmers are trapped, Mr. Speaker, sir. If they stop farming, they will lose their lease, and they'll be landless and homeless. That's why many of them continue, because they have a cane farming lease. If they stop farming sugarcane, they will lose their lease. They won't have a home. They'll become landless. So they stay and they toil, and they ask for more subsidies. And politicians come along and say, we'll get you more. Say they are more vulnerable. We cannot condemn our cane farmers to that kind of hopeless existence, Mr. Speaker, sir. We want our sugarcane farmers to earn more than this. And to protect the interests, we will start with a new scheme to get sugarcane farmers into alternative livelihood programs. We have allocated $1 million for lease facilitation for sugar and agriculture farmers, also other agriculture farmers, so our farmers can choose and get into high yield and more productive ventures. Mr. Speaker, sir, we are providing $403 million directly to the Ministry of Health and Medical Services in this budget to beef up its resources. The ministry will hire additional 238 intern nurses, 140 medical interns, 10 nurse practitioners, 43 midwives, and 114 doctors. $25 million is specifically dedicated for COVID-19 response for testing, isolation, quarantine, and vaccination drive. Additional funding has been provided for procurement of oxygen supplies and other essential medical equipment and supplies. Funding has also been allocated for capital works, including $7 million for the construction of the new maternity unit, $2.5 million for Lambasa Hospital interior upgrade, and a total of over $6 million for upgrade and maintenance of medical facilities around the country. As part of the public-private partnership arrangement with Healthcare Fiji Limited, the Bar Hospital will start operations in December 2021, while the Lautoka Hospital is scheduled to commence operations in March 2022, and its services from March 22 will include offering 24-hour service of open heart surgery. We are providing $20 million under Head 50 with an additional $25.7 million under the Ministry of Health for the running of the Lautoka Hospital. Mr. Speaker, sir, we are providing $1.5 million to subsidize kidney dialysis treatment. Government will provide a subsidy of $150 per treatment, and at centres where cost is $150 per treatment, this would effectively mean that the patient will pay no cost. However, we'll be extending it to other centres too, where they can go and use the $150. But we are very mindful that a lot of these centres that run privately or through other organizations keep on increasing their fees. This is why we had said from day one that we will only allow for dialysis where we have centres like in Lambasa, the one that's been set up in Nandera, for up to 50%. We have now increased it to $150, Mr. Speaker, sir. To help people work safely from home as much as possible, government will reduce duties and VAT on digital equipment needed for conferencing, collaboration, distance learning, which will be imported at a rate of free fiscal, free import excise, and 9% VAT. Currently, telecommunication equipment attracts 5% fiscal, free import, and 9% VAT. However, the telecommunication companies normally pay or apply for, I should say, duty-free importation under Section 10 of the Customs Tariff Act. To make sure Fijians in the north have the ability to connect to fast internet speeds, we are pressing ahead with the Northern Connectivity Project. This initiative focuses on 40 schools and health centres in the Northern Division and is on track to be completed by December of this year. This project will bring reliable access to power, internet and ICT equipment to at least 20,000 Fijians in close proximity to these 40 sites, as well as other emergency portable satellite-based solutions for the deployment of appropriate assistance in times of disaster. Duties will now be free for all audiovisual equipment, including microphones, headphones, loudspeakers, amplifiers, television, cameras, digital cameras, video recorders, radio cassettes and radio receivers. Most items will be free of duty, fiscal and VAT. But VAT will be payable, of course. Government reduced duty on around 2,000 customs tariff line items in 2020-2021 budget. To provide certainty and confidence to business and consumers, the reduction in these duty rates will be maintained. There will be a 200% tax deduction for investment in fogging machines used for decontamination and sanitizing workplaces, and a 50% investment allowance will be provided on capital expenditure incurred in the development of cold storage facility from 1 August 2021. $20,000 will go towards undertaking a study on aged care services in Fiji. There exists massive opportunity in the area of developing facilities, especially targeted towards developing elderly and retirement homes. Furthermore, $30,000 will be allocated for a study on medicinal industrial hemp. Mr. Speaker, sir, vaccination passport. As more adults in Fiji are fully vaccinated, we are developing secure vaccine passports, which are essentially digital vaccination certificates. So you can prove that you have been vaccinated. And also recent COVID-19 test results will also be shown on that. This digital tool will be available in two forms: a personalized digital wallet, whereby Fijians can have their vaccination and COVID-19 test information right on their smartphones, or paper printed with readable parts such as barcodes or QR codes. We're calling these passports, which usually you only need to travel internationally. But these digital certificates will have domestic and international applications too, and indeed many countries are now requiring countries with whom they travel to or expect people to travel from to have digital vaccine passports. We know to expect some rule breakers seeking to fabricate vaccine cards, just as we know to expect abusive government assistance program. To protect against fraud, An individual's biometric information of a person will be captured to form the basis of identity authentication in addition to the birth records and photo ID. The vaccination and COVID-19 test results will be linked to a confirmed identity, making it very hard to cheat the system. If you try and you're caught, there will be serious consequences, of course, as you will try and cheat with your normal passport. We will guard the credibility of these passports zealously. Other countries need to trust our system and the reported progress of our vaccination program to allow for seamless cross-border verification and authentication during travel. We are working to make our vaccine passports compliant with the International Civil Aviation Organization, or ICAO, and the General Data Protection Regulation, GDPR, of the European Union. That means that fully vaccinated visitors can have a holiday in Fiji without going into quarantine. That can also mean fully vaccinated Fijians being able to travel abroad without entering into quarantine. That means we can pave the way towards opening restaurants and large gatherings in Fiji only to fully vaccinated people. Mr. Speaker, sir, before I explain this budget's allocation in the education sector, I would wish to remind everyone that there was no national commitment in this country for the education of young Fijians, girls and boys, until we made it so. We began the education revolution with the introduction of free education for primary and secondary schools, subsidized transportation, and other assistance to students, and gave unprecedented access to tertiary education with the Tertiary Education Loan Scheme and the National Toppers Scheme. We made many tough calls in this budget, Mr. Speaker, sir, but the choice to maintain free education wasn't a choice at all. It was a non-negotiable necessity. And we will continue to ensure that every child receives primary and secondary education fully paid for by the government. We are setting aside approximately $60 million to cater for over 220,000 primary and secondary school students from years 1 to 13 under the Free Education Initiative. Mr. Speaker, sir, that funding falls within a total allocation of $703.1 million to the education sector. This includes $442.9 million to the Ministry of Education, which is actually the largest ministry with about 12,000 teachers, $71.4 million in operation grants to higher education institutions, $159.6 million for TELS and National Toppers Scheme, and $28 million for reconstruction of schools. We are also allocating $17 million for transportation assistance for more than 100 primary and secondary school students from low-income households, which of course includes not just buses, but also the minibuses, and also in some places where we provide transportation through boats and punts. Mr. Speaker, sir, our support to tertiary students will continue. This visionary investment in our future has benefited over 48,000 students since its inception in 2014. And more than 19,000 have completed university or professional education and entered the workforce. As times have changed, so must this program. We face a different labor market, different dynamics, and new opportunities that we did 7 years ago when this program was introduced. So tonight, Mr. Speaker, sir, we are announcing some necessary changes to our tertiary education funding. Effective from the next financial year, Mr. Speaker, sir, we will introduce means testing for TELS. TELS will now only be provided to students from families with household income of less than $100,000. All recipients above the age of 18 must also be fully vaccinated. Last year, we changed the eligibility rules so that students with 250 marks and above would qualify for TELS. We're now going to raise the entry mark for TELS to a minimum of 280 marks in the new academic year. For study areas where there is currently an oversupply of graduates, such as in accounting, tourism, law, management and public administration, and certain areas in teacher training, medicine and health, eligibility marks will be increased to 300 marks for year 13. To aid those in more technical degree programs, we have a new financial assistance scheme for all TELS students who are required to complete a period of industrial or clinical attachment to allow them to graduate from this sponsored program. As they gain invaluable real-world experience, these students will now be entitled to a monthly allowance of $100 top-up on what is being provided already by the employers. Mr. Speaker, sir, in line with the needs of a modernizing economy, we are also introducing a new stream of TELS with 5,000 placements available for TVET courses at FNU. This includes certificates 3 and 4, as well as diploma level 5. Those students who will not be able to make the cutoff marks, or who want to go into various other vocational studies, or those who want to leave year 12 and go into, for example, engineering and various other vocational courses offered by FNU will be able to do so under the system. Mr. Speaker, in 2020-2021 financial year, we suspended TELS for MBBS, given the oversupply of doctors based on the expected number of graduates we have funded earlier. However, we had said at that time that we might consider some form of funding if the economic situation allows. Today we are announcing, Mr. Speaker, sir, that all MBBS students that privately enrolled with a minimum year 13 mark of 340, first year GPA of 3.0 or more, and family income below $100,000 will be eligible for a one-off payment of $10,000, government grant towards the MBBS education. We will continue our scholarship through support through toppers in priority areas, Mr. Speaker, sir. But we are redirecting 120 of the 600 awards to applicants in the civil service and the private sector, with a higher priority given to females, in particular from the private sector. 95 of the 120 awards will go towards study in areas of inclusive education, early childhood education, counseling and psychology. And these areas are, you know that lack a lot of people trained in these areas. The remaining 25 awards will be for postgraduate programs such as dermatology, anesthesia, epidemiology, midwifery, obstetrics, gynecology, emergency nursing, surgery and pathology. So these people are already, some of them would be already working as doctors or nurses. They'll continue to work, will pay their fees, and they'll be able to have the income, but also not be able to have to bear the burden of these fees. And therefore will then be able to get more trained people. Mr. Speaker, sir, we're also changing the Tertiary Scholarship and Loans Board name to the Tertiary Education and Loan Service, with the aim to rebrand TSLB into a more service-oriented institution that is committed to service its students. And the new Tertiary Education and Loan Service has been provided an operating grant of $1.5 million to fulfill its mission of working with students towards their education, not against them. To that end, Mr. Speaker, sir, we're also harmonizing the GPA requirement across all the higher education institutions to 67%. That is, of course, a fancy way of saying that if an institution has a total GPA of 4.5, students will be required to maintain a GPA of 3. Similarly, for an institution that has a GPA of 5, NTS students will have to maintain a GPA of 3.35. This will only be applicable for new awards. The academic assessment criteria will also move from the academic term to cumulative results. Effective from 1 January 2023, students who undertake foundation studies will not be eligible for TELS. Students who are currently enrolled in foundation studies and complete them by the end of this year will be eligible for TELS in 2022. Mr. Speaker, sir, due to the pandemic, about 25,983 Fijian students across 3 universities in Fiji are currently attending classes and having examinations on online platforms. The over 8,000 Year 13 students also need access to data to undertake research for their studies, and indeed, the Minister for Education, I'm sure, will be talking a lot on this as to how she intends to get them graduated to qualify for the university courses. Given that most students rely on the internet for online classes and conducting research activities, government in partnership with ATH will provide a monthly data top-up of $20 a month to each Fijian student to assist them in their online studies, I should say. I'm saying Fijian students because there are also some foreign students in our universities. So this is only applicable to Fijian students enrolled in Year 13 in all the 3 universities. This will only be available during the semester and school term periods, but the data can be used however the students like. We prefer that you don't waste it on watching dance videos on TikTok, but you are adults and that is your choice. The government will contribute $100,000 with the rest provided by ATH, and it's worth quite a substantial amount of money. Mr. Speaker, sir, we will continue to ensure that our security forces are well equipped to keep Fijians safe. In fact, the Fiji Police Force is one of the only few divisions of government where additional new recruitment will be allowed. We are counting on our police to see our COVID-safe health measures enforced nationwide. Lives depend on it, so they will be staffed appropriately. The Fiji Police Force is allocated $184.3 million in this budget, $152.4 million for operating expenditure, and $27.9 million for capital expenditure. This includes funding for 328 positions, promotion of 158 police officers, and recruitment of 82 new police officers, 78 special constables, 7 civilian officers, and 3 government wage earners. Mr. Speaker, sir, government will continue to fund the construction of new police stations currently underway in Nakasi, Nandi, Lotoka and Nalawa. $25 million is allocated for the ongoing construction of police stations, which will expand the reach of law enforcement to Fijians living in the central and western divisions. An additional $1 million is allocated for renovation, extension and upgrade of existing police posts. Mr. Speaker, sir, $1.2 million is provided to undertake special drug operations that arise based on any suspected cases of drug-related activities in all the divisions. The force has discovered new practices that are rapidly transforming illicit drug trade. Over the course of the past 2 years, this operation has uncovered over $200 million in various narcotics. A further $1.5 million is provided for capital purchases to adequately equip the police and police stations to detect criminal activity and lower the response time of officers called to action, including procurement of boats and outboard motor engines, communication and other specialized equipment. The Republic of Fiji military forces provided funding of $79.7 million and $36.5 million is provided to the Fiji Correction Service. Mr. Speaker, sir, COVID or not, the nation's infrastructure must continue to be built. Services must be expanded and we still must drive and travel, so our roads must be maintained. $500 million will go towards upgrading, modernizing and expanding our road network and the provision of clean and safe drinking water and electricity. $270 million is provided for the Fiji Roads Authority, $195 million to the Water Authority of Fiji, and $26.6 million to the Ministry of Infrastructure and Meteorological Services. This includes over $11 million for grid extension and house wiring and rehabilitation of diesel schemes for communities that have been relocated to protect them from the rising seas. Mr. Speaker, sir, EFL will now be responsible for back-to-back work, including not just grid extension, but also house wiring to make the process more efficient and remove delays. Mr. Speaker, sir, despite limiting the expenditure of all other line ministries and departments, we made smart cuts that allow these ministries to continue to deliver the services that we all count on. The need for fiscal discipline is widely understood across government and we are committed to doing the absolute best with the resources at our disposal. Mr. Speaker, sir, when we speak of future-proofing Fiji, we have to acknowledge the very real threats that are out there, like climate change, and act to protect ourselves. But we should also look ahead through a lens of optimism and opportunity, like the opportunity to build back better. We certainly know how to do that. We spent more than $250 million rebuilding resilient schools after TC Winston. Now tasked with rebuilding and restarting many sectors of our economy, we have the chance to build back better once again. We have an opportunity, Mr. Speaker, sir, to accelerate our transition to becoming a greener, bluer and more sustainable society. We can ingrain new ways of thinking about our oceans, our rivers and our seas and our waterways as an interconnected system that sustain the biodiversity that we need as a country and indeed as a planet. And through our recovery and into next year, we are going to take a deep transformative dive into bluer and greener possibilities with a fundamental focus on creating sustainable jobs and livelihoods. Mr. Speaker, sir, to reduce waste and actually repurpose it for something productive, we are funding the new Fijian stewardship of tires in the 2021-22 financial year with an allocation of $200,000. It's a tragedy, Mr. Speaker, sir, to see used tires ending up in ditches by the road, strewn across the coast and in our communities that become breeding grounds for mosquitoes. Rather than being discarded and left to become unsightly breeding grounds for mosquitoes, they can actually be used for productive purposes. Through this new program, Mr. Speaker, sir, we'll be buying back used tires for loose tire imports and imposing a tire recycling levy on all new and second-hand imported vehicles. We'll also roll out tire refund scheme for existing on-road tires and for legacy tires in dump yards, backyards and stockpiles. Mr. Speaker, sir, the Ministry of Economy, the Climate Change Division, the Ministry of Waterways and Environment will work with tire importers and retailers, local recycling companies and repair shops to get this program off the ground and keep used tires out of our environment. Just as a matter of interest, Mr. Speaker, sir, Fiji imports an average of over 290,000 tires per year, and an estimated 565,000 tires are currently being used on Fijian roads. Through this program, we expect to not only extend the value chain of tires, but also create a vibrant recycling sector that can eventually spread throughout the Pacific. We also expect to use recycled shredded tires in road construction initiatives such as rubber, like glass. All of this repels water, and FRA, depots will be used to collect these tires. And indeed, there are currently talks with a company that is going to mix bitumen with shredded tire to lay on our roads. Mr. Speaker, sir, to incentivize investments in the recycling sector, any new investment in recycling business will be granted a tax holiday and a duty concession package. Under this initiative, businesses are offered 3 years income tax holiday for capital investments from $250,000 to $500,000, a 5-year tax holiday for capital investments between $500,000 to $2 million, a 10-year tax holiday for capital investment between $2 million to $5 million, a 15-year tax holiday for capital investment between $5 million to $10 million, and a 20-year tax holiday for capital investments in excess of $10 million. To further incentivize these new green investments, customs import duty exemption will be provided on raw materials, machinery and equipment, including spare parts for recycling businesses. Mr. Speaker, sir, in the eyes of the watching world, Fiji is respected as a model force and a model nation for climate and oceans action. And this budget leverages of our leadership. This budget, Mr. Speaker, leverages our leadership to launch a new Jobs for Nature initiative, to engage the unemployed in nature reforestation work such as planting mangroves and seagrasses. These natural barriers do more than provide a buffer between communities in the rising seas. They support ecosystems that strengthen food security. So these jobs for nature create jobs for many others. It's an obvious win for all of society, and government will raise $4 million in green bonds to fund this initiative. Mr. Speaker, sir, as we announced last year, we are now banning the use of polystyrene, more commonly known as styrofoam, from 1 August 2021. Just to be clear, this entails a complete ban on the import, export and use of polystyrene and also raw material used to make polystyrene products. The Fijian government took a well-planned and phased approach by banning imports and exports of polystyrene from 1 Jan 2021. In doing so, we gave a 7-month transitionary grace period for local manufacturers and retailers to adapt their businesses to operations without polystyrene. The Environment Management Act 2005 has been updated in this regard to now include the Environment Management Polystyrene Product Exemption. The polystyrene ban will help curb the pollution in our waterways, oceans and environment. Mr. Speaker, sir, to operationalize our recently passed National Ocean Policy and launch projects to sustainably manage Fiji's 1.3 million square kilometers of exclusive economic zone, or EEZ, we are working with the United Kingdom and the United Nations to issue a sovereign blue bond in 2022. We are also engaged with the World Bank and a range of other actors in shaping the development of this strategic sector of our economy. These are investments in jobs, in ecosystems, in the health of the planet. During this decade, our sustainable blue economy will be one of the largest and most exciting sectors of the economy. All our seaweed, pearl, crab, and prawn farmers already know it. Diving professionals know it. Our ocean, when managed sustainably, can host an extremely successful industry for us. It can spawn new businesses, such as fish processing at the community level in maritime regions, the building of nature-based seawalls to protect coastal communities, and conservation-based tourism across our blue economy. And to protect against intensifying climate risks, the Ministry of Economy, in collaboration with the Pacific Insurance and Climate Adaptation Program, or PCAP, administered by the United Nations Capital Development Fund, has developed Fiji's and the region's first ever market-based parametric microinsurance product to benefit smallholder farmers, fishers, market vendors and small business owners. These Fijians have been most vulnerable to climate disaster, yet the least able to insure their businesses. Through a pilot launch in early October 2021, the product will initially support a group of 500 sugarcane, rice, coconut and root crop farmers, fishers and market vendors, many of whom are women. Following the pilot, we will scale up coverage to reach 1,000 beneficiaries before the 2021 cyclone season begins in November. To support this groundbreaking initiative, VAT exemption will be provided to all climate and disaster risk microinsurance products. By making these products more affordable, we extend them to low-income and vulnerable sectors previously beyond the reach of mainstream insurance. Mr. Speaker, sir, as we had agreed earlier on, as we know that we already pay all the rental expenditure for all the UN offices in Fiji, and we had agreed to construct a United Nations building to serve as the UN headquarters in the Pacific. We are the hub of the region. We look forward to being the home of the UN Pacific's operations. We had already invited private sector to build a purpose-built building to accommodate not only government offices, but also for the United Nations in a single, secure and functional complex in the central business district of Suva, and to have and meet some of the protocols, for example, regarding vulnerability to tsunamis, etc. 3 possible sites have been identified. In fact, our team was with the head of the UN just a couple of days ago. We believe they've selected a site. That investment will go ahead, and we expect it to be completed in no more than 30 months' time. However, we are not paying for any of the capital costs. We'll simply be paying a long-term rental agreement where the UN actually will be based, Mr. Speaker, sir. This will, of course, create jobs in construction and will be similar to a couple of the ministries that will be moved out to the Nasinu corridor, including the Ministry of Education and Women and Children. Mr. Speaker, sir, as we look into the future of our democracy, we are providing $23.1 million to the Fijian Elections Office to continue preparations for the 3rd genuine parliamentary election in Fijian history. Elections can be held anytime from 9 July 2021 to 9 January 2023. An additional $16.3 million is provided under Head 50 in the event that the elections are held within the 2021-2022 financial year. Or I should say, held in the next financial year, which is 2022-2023 financial year. $1.5 million of that total value will go to Fiji Police Force to maintain security during elections. Mr. Speaker, sir, before I conclude, I would like to thank publicly the number of people who have been working together on this budget, in particular from the civil service. Because a number of these officers, including quite a few in the Ministry of Economy, tested positive for COVID-19, and in various other offices. I would like to thank in particular the Acting Permanent Secretary for Economy, Shiriganda. I'd like to thank the head of Budget, Iso Talemaimbao, the head of Treasury, Nemaya Dawai, and the head of Fiscal Policy, Mohammed Jabed. Of course, the Solicitor General and his team, the team at the FRCS. Most of the nights the meetings were held by Zoom, some people from home. Some people actually refused to come to the Ministry of Economy because they were scared they'll get COVID-19. So it's under those very strenuous conditions that we were able to put this document together. And in fact, the budget books that you see was just printed, I think, around about midday or just after midday today. So, Mr. Speaker, sir, I'd like to publicly acknowledge them for their hard work under the strenuous conditions. I, of course, like to acknowledge Vinil, who's the head of the Climate Change Division. Mr. Speaker, sir, the assistance and support that government is announcing in this budget is contingent on reaching our vaccine target by October 31. As we made clear, if we fail or fall short, we'll have to revise the budget to cut back mightily on assistance, including social welfare, and announce major cuts in civil service salaries, and reduce our funding commitments across every arm of government and every sector of the economy. But if we do achieve that target, we put ourselves on a very different path, a path to recapture what we've lost, our livelihoods and our economic lifelines, and to build what we've gained. The new trades, skills and businesses, and the new ways technology plays a role in our lives. Mr. Speaker, sir, I want us all to look onto the horizon and imagine for a moment this year's Christmas in Fiji. By this Christmas, if we reach our vaccination targets, we could be fully protected from the coronavirus thanks to widespread immunity through vaccines. Gatherings can take place, sports can be played, and we can pray together in our houses of faith. Our borders could be open to some of our most important source markets of tourism. Planes could be flying. Careers could be restored. Government revenues could be on the rise, so we could deliver even more services and achieve more of our vision for the country. The ocean and our natural environment could offer us more than their beauty. They can provide us with many more sustainable livelihoods. And with our economy restored, when a climate-fueled disaster inevitably strikes us, we could respond from a position of strength. If we hesitate now, we'll kill our recovery before it can begin and give up all the possibilities of that better future. Stalling our recovery means delaying development, delaying our journey to resilience, and keeping us vulnerable to those same forces we are fighting before this pandemic swept us. We will leave ourselves at the mercy of the stronger storms, rising seas and other disasters brought by climate change, playing economic catch-up and scrambling to find the resources we need because we did not act boldly when we had the chance. It is the young people, Mr. Speaker, sir, who would suffer most from that travesty. We've spoken at length tonight about the duty of care we owe Fijians during crisis. When people need a helping hand, we must provide one. And through this budget, we are doing so for everyone. We are lifting the burden of your daily costs, and we are adding to the historic amounts we paid out in unemployment benefits. We are assisting our market vendors, our taxi drivers, our minibus drivers, carrier drivers, boat drivers, farmers, fishers, our traditional landowners, women, our youth, our students, our children, those living with disabilities and those who are unemployed, those who are living in poverty, as well as our civil servants, including our doctors, nurses, the police. And we are helping businesses from micro, small and medium enterprises to industry leaders. We are preparing tourism and the Fijians, the industry employees, for their recovery, and we are unlocking new opportunities in opportunity-rich sectors. Our social safety net will continue to keep those most vulnerable above the line of abject poverty. Free education continues, free medicine continues, and we are managing that expenditure sustainably, because the nation deserves more than temporary assurances of assistance, and it deserves more than the uncertainty of the status quo. Your government owes each of you your best possible chance at a recovery, and that is what this budget provides. We have never settled, Mr. Speaker, sir, for short-term thinking. This budget does not either. It places faith that many more of us will be vaccinated for the sake of the greater good. And it looks forward to our victory over this virus and the better, healthier and safer future within our reach. That is where our national compass is set, Mr. Speaker, sir. That is where we are headed. And come what may, we will reach our destination. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir.